10 years ago, on this day, something incredible began. After many teething issues, an allegedly horrendous false start, and over 5 years of conception, the first episode of HBO's Game of Thrones aired, lighting the biggest pop culture fire of the decade. And while it would be dramatic to say that television changed forever, a recounting of the history of drama television will never be complete without this ambitious adaptation of a veteran kook's magnum opus. Very few pieces of media could ever hope to define a decade as strongly as Game of Thrones did. The 80s had Cheers, the 90s had Seinfeld, the 2000s had To Ruin My Analogy, and when I think of television in the 2010s, or fuck it, just about the decade in general, I think this.
I did warn you not to trust me.
I think this. I think this.
You raped her! You murdered her!
I think this. And this.
By what right does the wolf judge the lion?
And this. And this.
Mother. The Lannisters send their regards.
But unfortunately, I also think all of these things.
I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
You want a good girl, but you need a bad pussy.
A finger in the bum.
Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Please sit.
Dick on.
This is your legacy!
You're the one with the magic breastplate stretcher.
So it's obvious to most that Game of Thrones saw a variance of quality over the years. In celebration of the show's 10th anniversary, our quest today is to track that variance and place each of the show's 73 episodes in some order from worst to best. Hopefully, we'll come across some help along the way. This list was determined by an extremely rigorous method, judging each episode by how much I liked it. Keep in mind that this is simply my own opinion and therefore indisputable fact. Okay, no, seriously, I want to think about these as purely televisual experiences in isolation from anything else, which means that for the first time in my adult life, I don't give a care about those darn books. I'm here to judge each episode against its own brethren. All we're asking is how well crafted each episode is, how well each episode communicates a good story, I guess. So if an episode has a great scene that is retroactively ruined by, you know, season 8, I'm not gonna take marks off of that episode, because that'd be dumb. Get comfy because we're in for a long haul. Starting from the worst and working very, very slowly up to the best, let's begin. Every Game of Thrones episode ranked. Number 73. The Bells. To quote myself from almost 2 years ago, fuck. Now, I know it's cliche to hate the bells, but consider that it's also cliche to hate the taste of dog shit. There's good fucking reason. To sum up the issues with the bells in 2 statements would be extremely reductive, but there's 73 of these to get through, so bite me. Firstly, none of the characters are acting like themselves, and secondly, nothing makes any sense. Long-established characters bend over backwards to suit the plot's need, as does the very concept of logical cause and effect. Even the character moments that sound fine on paper fall flat because everything leading up to them is utterly baffling. All the beauty in this episode is achieved through great contrivances and contempt for the audience. Most plot points could have gone any other way, and this gargantuan waste of human effort would have been markedly more worth the approximately $15 million it cost to produce. That's enough money to paint the entire White House with Chanel No. 5, in case that was on your bucket list. The only halfway good moment is Sandor getting past this guard, and everything else is actively broken. We all know in our heads that this is a terrible episode, but if you actually go back and watch it, experience it, feel its story corrupting your bones, man, is it utterly insufferable on a moment-to-moment basis. We simply haven't the time to dissect every issue with every episode, so for completely abandoning the portrayal of so many main characters and failing to uphold the story's core tenets at a moment so critical as the narrative's climax, The Bells earns the esteemed title of the worst ever episode of Game of Thrones. Congratulations.
Oh, it sounds like the firebending's back on.
Number 72. The Iron Throne. Boring, bland, empty, pathetic.
There's nothing here!
Following the uncaring and cataclysmic climax of the Bells, the Iron Throne is the sad, flaccid remainder we are left to deal with while we ponder what terrible life decisions we made to wind up in bed with this show in the first place. The showrunners decided it would be neat to end their production with one big character drama lacking any semblance of character. Heightened, dramatic moments that could have been heart-wrenching if only the characters involved were, you know, themselves. If your series leaves people writing fanfiction set after its ending, then at the very least you've probably done an alright job because people want to continue telling stories about your characters or the world they live in. But Game of Thrones ending saw everyone and their nans writing fanfiction replacing its end, trying to rewrite the way the series concluded. Yikes. Sure, some other big shows have had controversial endings, but I can't think of anything that saw this many people attempt to fix it. The only good thing that came out of this shit stain of an episode was the huge number of people who realized they could write a better story than this major studio production. To regale your memory, Tyrion finds his siblings' corpses next to a clearing and completely destroys one of the series' best lines.
Duty is the death of love.
And yes, Grey Worm teleports and the dragon inexplicably understands abstract symbols it's never seen before, and Jon uses a random dagger instead of Longclaw, and there's so much other dumb shit in this finale. But still, the worst scene of the episode, and perhaps the entire show, is this one. It honestly makes me weary to revisit. Gendry isn't even mentioned as a candidate for king, even though he's right fucking there. Chadmuir is incomprehensibly shot down as a loser. Davos tells eunuchs to start families, Yara forgets about her brother, and it's all in service of making Bran king for no reason. I can't imagine any of the people involved in this episode were happy with it. The show had been declining in quality for years at this point, and I wasn't expecting a satisfying end by any means, but the Iron Throne still found a way to break me. I was ecstatic that so many people used this episode and this season as a creative outlet, but it left me completely unmotivated. Dejected, spiraling. This thing I'd loved for so many years and devoted countless hours of my attention to, it had rotted beyond recognition before my eyes. My video about this episode is the most successful thing I've ever made, but I could never chase that success because what was the point of talking about this show anymore? There was nothing more to say. It was dead, and so was I. This episode annihilated my creative spirit for the better part of a year. And for that, it's somehow only the second worst episode of Game of Thrones. It was also nominated for the Outstanding Writing Emmy, by the way, get around that.
Number 71. The Long Night.
Every single thing that happens in The Long Night is stupid in at least two separate ways. If you're wondering why the battle is so nonsensical, it's because Benioff and Weiss couldn't comprehend the possibility that the people in charge of this thing might not be as woefully incompetent as they themselves are. The White Walkers were the show's biggest threat, introduced in the very first scene. 7 seasons were spent developing the conflict, emphasizing its importance, and building to its climax. No matter how stupid the rest of this show gets, you thought, this most major of plots must have a satisfying ending. lmao idiot gets sucked in. Yeah, nah, turns out that it wasn't even that important, and it ended in a way that satisfied none of the build-up. The looming threat, the apocalyptic catastrophe, all it meant in the end was a convenient way to dispose of some characters we didn't need anymore. The lighting issues and associated contempt for the audience would have been more than enough to put this episode in the bottom 10, but then they had to go ahead and completely butcher the story too. So many plots and character arcs come to a head here, and as with the Bells, they all collapse in a floundering mess at the last hurdle. Jon's involvement in the battle that concludes the story he's been central to for 8 years is negligible at best. The notion that political squabbles distract from existential apocalyptic threats turns out to be not an issue. Arya is shoehorned into the resolution for honestly no reason beyond Benioff and Weiss's weird obsession with Maisie Williams. God knows what the fuck was supposed to happen in the crypts. Like, why are scenes that are necessary to explain how characters characters got where they are, left on the cutting room floor. Also, like the Bells, there is a non-zero amount of beauty in this episode, but drama television is ultimately a narrative medium, and the story is the most important element. Production facilitates storytelling. The most elaborate set piece, the most intricate long shot, the most explosive visuals, the most exciting choreography. Sure, it can all be impressive on a technical level, but it has no chance of resonating with an audience unless it all rests atop a compelling story, and being able to fucking see helps as well. How anyone could even for the shortest moment dare to consider comparing this feature-length omni-shambles to Helm's Deep is fucking unfathomable to me. For causing immense eye strain in tens of millions of viewers and squandering one of the longest build-ups in television history, The Long Night goes down as one of the worst disasters put to screen, and the third worst episode on my list. And the fourth best on TV guides. Are you fucking kidding me? Why would you throw your sword, you idiot?
Number 70. The Last of the Starks.
If The Bells was where the train crashed into the side of an orphanage, it's only because the last of the Starks saw the train veering angrily off the tracks in the first place, probably due to confusion over speeding past the end of the line. The pacing of this episode is frankly bizarre. By this point, all the stories had been rolled into literally just one plot with two sides, so the show could no longer indicate the passage of time by jumping to a different story, as was its formula for the better part of a decade. So this feverish episode is forced to carelessly leap from one contrived story beat to the next with nothing to space out the events. Call it a scramble to set up for the Bells or whatever, either way this episode is an outlandish comedy of errors. Obvious solutions to simple problems are routinely ignored by supposedly smart characters for the sake of getting the plot where it apparently needs to go, which is about as antithetical to Gurm's method of plotting as you could get. It's blatantly obvious that this episode was produced on what surely amounts to a first draft or near enough to make no matter.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces.
Like, this is the kind of dumb fucking issue that a revised script couldn't possibly suffer from. Imagine feeling the need to explain your simple-ass IKEA flat pack plot in these dumb fucking post-episode breakdowns and then only offering surface-level post-hoc explanations. How little of a shit do you have to give about your creation, the biggest TV drama ever, that not only do you let this fever dream of a scene make it to the air, but you also completely fail to come up with any clarifications for it. For breaking my brain in 8 different places, The Last of the Starks goes straight in the bin.
It stinks. It stinks. It stinks.
Number 69. Nice. The Dragon and the Wolf.
As if the terribly constructed death of Littlefinger wasn't enough, The Dragon and the Wolf also offers such great hits as
Robert's rebellion was built on a lie.
and
There is no conversation that will erase the last 50 years.
and
Lady Sansa, forgive me.
I'm confused.
and
I cannot serve 2 queens.
and
Maybe it really is all
Cocks in the end.
and
You're the strongest person I know.
And look, we don't have time for all of them, as I do faintly recall saying that most lines in this episode are fucking dumb. Credit where it's due though, it does have this. And boat sex. This episode is a great demonstration of the show's growing lack of pacing and payoff, the lack of care given to the script. The culmination of the season-long conflict between Sansa and Arya is, well, it's resolved off-screen and leads to an unearned victory over Peter, a once thrilling character who is now a nothing villain. The incredible twist of Viserion being revived by the Night King was spoiled in the previous episode. Cersei's pregnancy was similarly told to us earlier for no real reason. Jon's parentage was told to us in the season 6 finale, and the twists that did happen in this episode are total bananas. Apparently it was the Night King's plan to destroy the wall with the undead Viserion, even though according to the showrunners themselves, that was an opportunistic grab. Was anyone surprised by this, by the way? Like, what the fuck else did you expect to happen? Aren't the season finales of this show supposed to have, like, big surprising twists? I guess that was an expectation they couldn't just leave unsubverted. All of this said, I think the biggest biggest pitfall of the Fire Lizard and the Doggo, the penultimate season's conclusion and the last episode we would see for almost 2 years, is that absolutely nothing interesting happens in the huge-ass meeting between almost all the important characters, and many unimportant characters. Nothing really changes hands. Cersei is offered a truce which clearly benefits her, and she reluctantly accepts it even after Jon refuses her terms for no reason. Like, give us anything to work with. Cersei takes Tyrion as collateral, why not? Or demands Peter as a hostage or a bannerman or something because she knows he's in Winterfell. The last time Cersei had all her enemies in one place, something happened in spite of the consequences that should have come. Yet this time, nothing. And God knows why Bran waited until Sam got to Winterfell before he told anyone the thing about the people, but fuck it! This episode has the dialogue, pacing, and direction of an 80-minute video game cutscene, and for that, the dragon and the wolf can piss right off.
Number 68. Winterfell.
The subject of my worst video. They took an extra year to make season 8, and they came back with this? How embarrassing! This episode is so empty. Winterfell might just be the most forgettable episode of this show. The only somewhat decent course in this overpriced and undercooked meal is the drama revolving around Sam, his father and brother, and his feelings about Daenerys executing them. And even that is contingent on him somehow making it from Old Town to Winterfell without hearing about the invading dragon lady executing one of the foremost lords of the kingdom. Must have traveled with his fingers in his ears. Oh, and I guess Bran chose not to tell him too. Anyway, there's a bunch of reunions in this episode, and for the most part, they're thoroughly underwhelming. Again, the Sam thing works alright, and there's a lot going on in this scene, but of course, Jon's parentage has already been revealed to the audience twice, so the grand reveal is robbed of most of its emotional intensity. The audience knows crucial information that the relevant character doesn't know. This is dramatic irony, and Lord knows it's an effective literary device, but you have to ask yourself, what tension or complexity does the story gain by revealing Jon's parentage to the audience before Jon himself knows? He's named King in the North after the first reveal, which is pretty irrelevant because it has like nothing to do with his parents, and boat sex happens after the second reveal, which like, okay, so the audience knows he's fucking his aunt. Great. I don't see how this is worth losing the weight that this scene could have had. As with the dragon and the wolf, the reveal in Winterfell was pointlessly spoiled earlier in the show. And those are just the problems with the best scene on offer. The rest of this thing is so fucking flimsy, I'm getting ready to yell Jenga. Is that a thing? Is that how you play Jenga? Ned Umber is sent to a gruesome and futile death so that he could do a spooky jump scare and not accomplish anything when Ed and Tormund somehow arrive at Last Hearth at the exact same time, after the huge zombie army had passed through. But they still beat them to Winterfell in the next episode. Theon rescues Yara in what amounts to a formality with no explanation. The incredibly important Golden Company is introduced, and Cersei speaks directly for the audience.
I was told the Golden Company had elephants.
There's this cheesy fucking Aladdin roleplay wish fulfillment garbage we could have replaced with anything, and fuck, this episode is pointless. On a series rewatch, God forbid, you could safely skip most of this. Jaime arrives at Winterfell at the end, that's all you need to know. For wasting my goddamn time, Winterfell bad.
Number 67. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken.
You may not have expected to see Season 5 appear so early on the list, but that's just because you've forgotten how utterly dreadful Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken truly is. The opening of this episode is the longest continuous segment of the show where nothing happens. It is so boring. Arya's time at the House of Black and White is literally unremarkable. I've got nothing to say about it. The next scene has at least something, with Tyrion telling Jorah his father is dead, but it doesn't really go anywhere before we're snapped back to Arya to learn more confusing inconsistencies about the Faceless Men. We return to Jorah and Tyrion being captured by slavers, which is a fine scene, but it took 19 minutes for anything to actually happen in this episode. And the rest of its runtime does little to redeem this. Peter exchanges some plot holes with Cersei before things resume being boring. Aside from Doran and Arya being epic, the conflict at the Water Gardens is an insane comedy of errors that can only be laughed at so many times, and constitutes perhaps the second worst fight of the show's run. The Queen of Thorns arrives in King's Landing to throw down with Cersei, and that's fine, but the subsequent inquest of Loras Tyrell is fucking abysmal. Oliver makes no sense, and his knowledge of a birthmark on a highborn lord who he squired for being counted as solid evidence of his affair with Loris is just terrible writing. Do better. And to cap the episode off, we have Sansa's wedding complete with wifely duties. It's tasteless and disgusting, and the only good thing about it is that Alfie gets to show off his chops. You may think it's strange to place this one below the majority of season 7, but I would definitely rather watch those episodes than this one. For exposing my birthmark, unbowed, unbent, unbroken has to scrub the floor for 5 minutes.
Number 66. Beyond the Wall.
When this episode first aired, I was convinced that it could not be topped. And yet, of the 7 episodes that came after Beyond the Walrus, 6 of them are worse than it. To begin describing the issues with this brainless zombie of an episode, I would have to... Wait, who the fuck is that?
My name is Alt Schwift X, and Season 7 Episode 6 is the one that broke me. This is the one where John and his pals go on a zombie hunt beyond the wall. A random collection of incongruent characters with nothing in common but high Q ratings, band together on a suicidally dangerous journey deep into enemy territory, on foot, all so they can catch a zombie, so they can bring it all the way back south to show Cersei to convince her not to attack them when they go all the way back north to fight the zombies. There are so many reasons why this plan is terrible that it could be its own 73-part video. But when the plan goes predictably terribly, Jon asks Daenerys for help by sending Gendry on a multi-day ice marathon to then send a raven south asking Daenerys to fly north to save them, while Jon and the boys sit and wait surrounded by the dead for days. The Game of Thrones show has always had a loose relationship with time and logistics and common fucking sense, but this is the moment they completely jump the shark with a plotline that has no consistency with the tone or context or logic of this world. This doesn't feel like a grounded political drama. It doesn't even feel like a dark, mysterious fantasy. It feels more like a Marvel superhero movie, with the cool, fun heroes making cool, fun quips about cocks.
Dick. Cock.
While they fight faceless hordes of morally unambiguous bad guys. The whole farcical plotline is a blatant contrivance to get one of Daenerys' dragons killed, so that next episode the Night King can use this dragon to break the wall. Of course, this raises questions, like how did the Night King know that Daenerys would come? Was this a trap? Is he a greenseer like Bran? Can he see the future? He sure as fuck didn't see Arya coming in the final season. And why did the Hound see this mountain in a vision? Why did Benjen Stark return just to fuck off again? Why did they walk all this way instead of flying or at least riding a horse? In this episode, Beric says the living fight the dead, it's good guys versus bad guys, and we don't need to understand any more than that. The show tells us to stop thinking. Don't expect the mysteries and politics and relationships to make sense. Just shut up and clap for the dragons. And yes, the dragons look great. The effects are great. The locations, music, acting are great. But the story feels so contrived, arbitrary, and empty that the rest has no meaning. And shit, that's just the Jon storyline. At Winterfell, Arya and Sansa have this maddeningly frustrating, pointless, artificial conflict. Like, it makes sense that there'd be some tension between Sansa and Arya, but in the space of 3 episodes, Arya goes from a heartfelt reunion with her sister to literally threatening to kill Sansa and wear her face as a mask. It's so bizarre and out of character and over the top, but apparently that's the best the writers could come up with to keep the Stark sisters busy this season. All the worst aspects of the final season, with nonsensical, contrived character conflicts and unexplained, underwhelming White Walker bullshit, was all foreshadowed here in the penultimate episode of Season 7.
Okay, look, great segment, but you'd better never try to upstage me again. For all the things that guy just said, I'm gonna wear Beyond the Wall's face as a mask.
Get on my horse, I'll take you around the universe.
Number 65. The Spoils of War.
Between the unceremonious dismissal of Mira Reed, the miraculously underwhelming reunion of Arya and her siblings, and the duel between her and Brienne that nobody asked for, the spoilers of war cemented Winterfell as the place where characters go to die. Peter, get out of there! This episode is off the fucking walls.
That sounds liberating.
Dick on.
Chaos is a
Great big tits you could bury your face in.
Missandei and Daenerys are giggling schoolgirls, Littlefinger is doing random shit just to see what happens, Cersei is trading debt for different debt, and the Lannister army is stretched thin for no fucking reason. Here, look at these inconsequential drawings I know nothing about. There's a reason that my video on this episode is a borderline experimental feverish meltdown. It's what I had to do to make any sense of this. Trying to critique this episode is like playing chess with a pigeon. A weird fucking way to spend your day. The majority of this dog's breakfast is built around the whacktastic battle at the end, because every episode's gotta have a big battle in it. That's what Game of Thrones is about. And yeah, it looks pretty cool, except for when Drogon's wings don't push the smoke and when they clip through that tree. Yes, I'm gonna be that critical, because for fuck's sake, if the visual spectacle is all you have, then you'd better be damn sure it's at least visually plausible when held up to any level of scrutiny. For spoiling what happens in the spoils of war, the spoilers of war gets a barely coherent analysis.
Number 64. Stormborn.
I would be nice to this episode, but that's not me. Stormborn pisses me off to no end. This one features Sideshow Mel showing up to bring Jon Snow to Dany's attention for prophetic reasons that are never really explored, which leads to a linguistics lesson that is not only wantonly out of place, but also gobsmackingly irrelevant, for a language that Dany has spoken longer than Missandei has, in a show that regularly makes egregious errors about its own languages that don't get corrected. Just saying, if you want a character to plausibly call out an inconsistency when it's relevant to the plot, which this isn't really, by the way, maybe previously demonstrate that consistency is important. Maybe. Anyway, that's that line, but it shows exactly how opportunistic and unplanned every little beat in this part of the story is. This line comes out of Hammerspace, essentially, to accomplish the arbitrary task of steering the plot in the right direction. It's shit writing. Nymeria also appears from Hammerspace in a bonkers scene that again is not only irrelevant, but actively detrimental. This is what should meet the cutting room floor, not the resolution of the entire Arya-Sansa conflict, and Hot Pie tells her she's hot. Fuck me, season 7 blows. Everything to do with Dany is insane, especially her conversation with Varys. Jon beats up Peter for some reason, Davos seems to think that Tyrion is a hoopy frood.
Sounds like a charmer.
Qyburn is being cute when asked about military strategy. Randall makes no sense. He was a fucking Targaryen loyalist. We almost get some Yara Yuri before, well, every episode's gotta have a big battle in it. That's what Game of Thrones is about. But the Citadel isn't too terrible, and you know what? This scene's pretty hot. For showing me Jacob Anderson's ass, Stormborn is honestly higher on the list than it should be.
Number 63. The Door.
Everyone's entitled to an opinion, so if you really like The Door, I can't do a damn thing about it, nor would I intend to. But I can voice my utter confusion at that opinion. It has one scene of note, and beyond the shock of the first viewing, that scene has scant little of value on offer. It's not as though some grand mystery had been made of Hodor's condition and this is the epic reveal. No, really it's just a plot point for its own sake. Hodor had remained a fan favorite this far into the series, in no small part due to the writer's inability to make him say terrible dialogue. Hodor! But honestly, looking back on the series, Bran fucking with his mind is just some weird anecdotal footnote. The real insanity and enormous issue with the scene comes into full view when you realize that dead-ass time travel is introduced for literally just this moment. It's briefly alluded to in Oathbreaker, so that's something, but it's about the only redeeming thing The Door has going for it, and it's from a different episode. Summer is dismissed with about as much care as Leaf is, the three-eyed Raven is nothing, even Rhaegar's actions make no sense, and fuck, I'm looking forward to destroying this episode in its own video. As for the remaining 40 minutes of the episode, it also is terrible in fresh, unique ways. The King's Moot strikes me as a lazy insult to those who have read Feast, and makes for a thoroughly underwhelming moment even divorced from the source material. Euron publicly admits to kinslaying and nobody cares. Peter offers Sansa an army and she refuses because she's so smart, and Brienne doesn't arrest or murder him for some reason. There's more boring shit at the House of black and white, the bloody hand is a good reprieve, I fucking love Richard E. Grant. Dany exiles Jorah for a third time, but she likes him this time for some reason. Meereen fucking sucks, and we meet the essential priestess Kinvara for the first and also last time. She knows random shit about Varys, and it's all very mysterious and ooh, but it's fucking hollow, empty, and directionless. Sansa sends Brienne away to deal with the Blackfish. Again, a very weird plot point that just serves to put everyone in the right place for the one scene they're building to. You can't just put this shit in the same series as Gurm's masterfully crafted interacting plots. You gotta do better than that, man. While its lows aren't quite as low as those of seasons 7 and 8, after getting over the artificial shock of its climax, The Door is sorely lacking in any highs. For going nowhere with a crazy idea, The Door sits snugly below the next entrant, but man, it's a close one. Why does a cave have a door?
Number 62. Battle of the Bastards.
Yes, I know. I get it. It looks very good. You don't need to tell me. I've seen it. You know what else I've seen, though? The rest of this fucking episode. Battle of the Bastards unfortunately begins with the Siege of Meereen, an embarrassingly rushed conclusion to the Meereen conflict, which the writers desperately wanted you to forget about as soon as possible.
My reign has just begun.
She leaves in the next episode. She puts Dario in charge. Like, it's just fucking awful. I'm willing to bet a lot of you completely forgot about this battle. The Sons of the Harpy just get... Dario and the Dothraki just mow them down like an unkempt lawn, and that's fucking it. The flagrant dismissal of the Sons of the Harpy is enough to put this episode in the depths of this list, but wait, there's more! Later, the Greyjoys show up to be lectured at by Tyrion, who is at his most unlikable, hypocritically judging Theon and making shit up about their interaction in Season 1. Yara and Daenerys become allies because they are both girl boss queens, and Yara is completely cool to end huge facets of the Ironborn culture to secure the alliance. Have you seen the Iron Islands? How the fuck could this place survive independently without raiding? And that's just Meereen. At Winterfell, there's Sansa's unthinkable refusal to cooperate with Jon, which they somehow thought would make the arrival of the Knights of the Vale a twist. What? Ramsay decides to meet Jon in the field, even though there's literally no need. Like, man, it's well directed, but the whole thing lacks any suspense. The tactics of the battle make no sense, according to people who are smarter than I am. People got mad at the kid for not zigzagging, and like, man, it just pisses me off when that kind of surface level observation is what becomes a mainstream criticism, like Rhaegar's wig or the Starbucks cup. Like, sure, that stuff could have been fixed easily, but what's more important is the consistency of the writing. And I guess Davos finds the burnt stag, fucking whatever. So why isn't this ranked lower? Well, Ewan Rayon single-handedly lifts this episode from the bottom 10. The show's last good villain makes watching this one more enjoyable than the preceding entries on the list. He gets a fittingly gruesome send-off, though the perpetrator's arc seems not at all influenced by her having committed this horrendous act. Basically, this shit's fucked up, but it wouldn't be right to blame this episode for its lack of impact. For insulting my height back in Season 1, Battle of the Bastards gets to play with my dogs.
Number 61. Eastwatch.
Beginning with the impossible survival of Jaime and Bronn, structured around Tyrion's batshit plan to bring a White to King's Landing, and concluding with the assembling of the Avengers, Eastwatch is one big scramble to get all the pieces in place for Beyond the Walrus and the season finale. And boy does it feel like a scramble. Teleporting is at a record high, Littlefinger is at his most pointless, and Davos is at his most senile.
Last time I was here, you killed my son with wildfire.
Given the intense emotional conflict between Tyrion and Davos that could have existed in its place, this might be the most insulting line in the series. The only compelling beat of this episode is Cersei learning that Tyrion was innocent of Joffrey's murder. Oh, and the crap meat that gives you a stiffy, of course. Beyond that, we get Bronn and Jaime's resurrection, Jon's storybook moment with Drogon, Jorah's incredibly timed arrival on Dragonstone, the beginning of Sam's miraculous continental journey with straws up his ears, and Cersei being mad at Jaime for doing literally nothing. Despite their amicable reunion in the previous episode, Sansa and Arya clash over bad vibes mainly, nothing in particular. Huh, weird. I thought Bran was dead.
I thought Bran was dead.
The Tarleys get baked, there's an extremely dumb meeting or three, Gendry gets dragged, kicking and screaming back into the plot, and Jorah doesn't fucking murder Tyrion, oh well. The scene at Eastwatch itself is passable, if not too predictable, but it's nice to see all of these characters' connections explored, albeit briefly. For bringing a Reddit meme into canon,
Thought you might still be rowing.
Eastwatch gets annulled by the High Septon.
What does annulment mean?
Whatever the fuck we want it to, Gilly.
Number 60. Book of the Stranger.
Despite harboring the genesis of Tormund's obsession with the big lady, Book of the Stranger sucks in a few major ways. Much of this episode is spent dwelling pointlessly on the High Sparrow and his unsubstantiated philosophy, leading to scenes so inconsequential I can't believe they would waste Jonathan Pryce's time like that. I'm so sorry, Papa. He's just talking about fucking shoes for minutes at a time, and it's as though this is all building to something, but man, it fucking isn't though. Honestly, King's Landing at this point in the show is just tedium. The first Stark reunion occurs at Castle Black, and yeah, it's pretty nice. I like how they brought together the two who cared the least about each other. Sansa tries to convince Jon to fight, but
I'm tired of fighting.
Which is fair enough. Brienne tells Davos that she killed Stannis and then she just walks away because her arc this season is all about doing whatever she wants and never facing repercussions. Meereen, as per usual, is dreadful. Somehow, Tyrion's proposed transitional period for abolishing slavery is perceived as unproductive, but the bigger problem is that the writers clearly don't know what to do with these characters in this plot, and the actors don't seem convinced of it either. Meereen in Season 6 is filler, and this is one of the worst examples of it. Theon decides that instead of complete servitude of the abusive Ramsay, he's gonna live his life in complete servitude of the abusive Yara. Osha's death is also fucking awful. Brilliant actors, but they can only lift a rushed concept so high. They so desperately needed to clean up these loose ends that they just did whatever they had to. Back at Castle Black, The Pink Letter is a frankly embarrassing adaptation that lacks any of the weight it does in A Dance with— hang on, I'm not supposed to talk about the books. Read the books, damn it. Anyway, this letter can fuck right off and so can its mates. So many things could have been going on in this scene, but all that happens is Jon gets pissed off enough to fight against Ramsay. The Super Dario bros track Dany to Vaes Dothrak, and a comedy of errors leads us to this awful final scene with all the Khals and the big fire, and it's all just terrible. Even if the rest of the episode wasn't a boring mess, which it is, this egregious scene, which is honestly shot like shit, would shoot it pretty far down the list. Getting into it would take too long, so for now I'll just say that for making Daenerys completely fireproof with no explanation, the Book of the Stranger has to listen to me talking about shoes for like 5 minutes.
Number 59. Dragonstone.
Shall we begin?
Fuck you, Dragonstone sucks. Arya's shenanigans at the Twins are a great setup for the incoherent wild ride that is Season 7. It was cool that they returned to cold opens for season premieres, and I will grant that it was good to see Arya doing anything for once. Strange that she got to the Twins before King's Landing though, that's kinda wacky. Anyway, she meets some guy, and I really just don't care. The only good scenes are Sam's shit montage coupled with the introduction of Slughorn and Sandor dealing with the past. The rest is pretty shit. Jorah is a full-time jump scare artist now. Brienne blames Podrick for trying his best, even though he's pretty good. Euron sucks as a villain, but at least Cersei's got a neat map. Winterfell fucking sucks now, as the only interesting person present has decided to sit this season out. Sansa has decided to become the worst character. The episode ends with Daenerys' capture of Dragonstone, because, of course, Stannis left it undefended, and there were no other more strategic points to stage an invasion from, for fuck's sake. It only makes sense if you're just gonna burn King's Landing, right? Ed lets Bran through the wall kinda just because he seems legit, and like, man, Season 7 is just exhausting. Fuck, I'm glad I've made breakdowns on each of these episodes, because summarizing them is such a confusing nightmare. For completely wasting Billy Postlethwaite's cameo, Dragonstone gets to empty my chamber pot.
Number 58. No One.
If Jaime and Bronn's ludicrous fight with the Sand Snakes in Season 5 is when Game of Thrones jumped the shark, then what Arya gets up to in No One must be when it backflipped over a megalodon. Having survived a dip in the filthy fucking canal immediately after several stabs to the general abdomen area, the one other person Arya knows in the city who happens to be an unregistered nurse / chronic domestic abuser heals her up just in time for her to participate in a cartoonish foot race, including a moment a bit too close to be ignored. The long-awaited showdown between noted bullshit antagonist The Waif and noted bullshit protagonist Arya Strong takes place in the most dramatic place possible, off-screen. Then Arya announces to Jaqen that she has finished her arc. Great, thanks. Goodbye! Thanks for the most bland, generic, empty, pointless plot this show saw. Meanwhile, Sandor goes on a killing spree and meets with the Beric Hood. Varys leaves Meereen just before it's attacked, but I guess that means nothing. We'll just waste time with an awful Tyrion scene, I guess. The Siege of Riverrun is resolved, which contains one pretty good scene, but also a lot of dumb shit, including the Blackfish's heroic last stand and death taking place in the most dramatic place possible. off-screen. The King's Landing plot goes nowhere slowly, with Tommen banning trials by combat to ensure that nothing exciting could possibly happen. Qyburn spoils Cersei's big surprise for us, the awful fucking Siege of Meereen begins, and though it sees one of the show's stupidest plots finally concluded, no one is still doomed to endure fondly Bronn. Right!
Number 57. The Queen's Justice.
By a sizable margin, the most well-crafted episode of Season 7, The Queen's Justice is still quite shite. Carried by two standout scenes, unfortunately it is dragged down by, all the Season 7 going on around those scenes. To get the good out of the way, Cersei's vengeance against Ilaria is completely chilling and perhaps the last chance Lena gets to really do Cersei things. And Olenna's death and confession is well-contrived, still well-written and acted. Like, the steps taken to get Jaime and Olenna in this room are dumb as fuck, but once they're in there, it's pretty damn good. I also want to commend this episode's title, which stands out as being quite clever and applicable amongst a bunch of episodes whose titles aren't. Now to get into the bad. Jon on Dragonstone fails to deliver in a number of ways. Davos is randomly a creep, and for some reason we're not telling people about Jon's resurrection. Melisandre has a random fucking conversation with Varys before Dany completely misses the point of having Jon come over in the first place. Euron parades through King's Landing and delivers
The bomb.
Excuse me, it's rude to interrupt. Cersei is Cersei for a bit before the insanity with the Iron Bank is established. Jon, Tyrion, and Daenerys take turns yelling about their problems.
You lost two brothers as well.
I thought Bran was dead.
It's just so easy to get all this shit right, and they didn't. Peter is extremely confusing just for a bit of fun, then Bran comes to Winterfell and emotes. Jorah's cured of grayscale, and okay, that's not awful.
I just started feeling better.
It's pretty good, but then we get to the mental battles of this episode, because every episode's got to have a big battle in it. That's what Game of Thrones is about. Both Casterly Rock and Highgarden look like trash. No fucking clue how Euron ambushed them, and so quickly too. The Tyrell army can't hold a castle long enough for reinforcements, but Jon can chill out on a random frozen lake for 8 years waiting for Dany, I guess. So yeah, these battles kind of piss on the fire that was starting to burn here. For being the final episode of the show to not have Arya Stark, the Queen's Justice sits above the rest of Season 7, but not all of Season 8.
Number 56. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
The best episode of the final two seasons' 13 episodes, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, still only made it to 18th on the list. Much as the trial of Jaime Lannister is a lackluster mess, it is decent character work for Brienne to vouch for him to convince Sansa. The ensuing tension between Daenerys and Jaime is never revisited, fuck knows why. He killed her fucking father and she never brings it up again, but it's good for the moment. Tyrion is finally held accountable for his many missteps, but this also goes nowhere. It's as though Cogman is trying to steer the story in a more rational, consequence-driven direction, so perhaps with him at the helm, this story could have actually had a somewhat decent conclusion. Alas. This episode was generally derided as being filler, which is simply not the case. It fits the format of a few other episodes, with pieces moving and interacting to establish the background for a moment of spectacle. Contemplative episodes mainly structured around singular dramas like You In or You Die or Mockingbird. Those episodes, however, aren't confined to a single location and don't have to deal with a billion plots coming together all at once. Those are big hurdles to jump, and the episode stumbles headfirst into them. My favorite is this scene with everyone huddled around the battle map. Like, you can literally see that there are too many characters here with too much unsettled beef between them. You can draw lines between a bunch of different combinations and probably very quickly write a scene more deserving of airtime than the Lunch Lady Davos scene with Shireen's ghost, who we never see again. Though it is riddled with the same issues of latter Dragon's show, save perhaps for the frantic pacing, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms also has a non-zero amount of character, spirit, and heart. Jenny's song, Brienne's knighting, Sansa and Theon's reunion, this is all pretty compelling. Cogman understands these characters, and for that, this episode stands above its malformed brethren, but still below all of the, good episodes. For a glint of side boob and a guzzle of milk, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms sits above the rest of Seasons 7 and 8, which is kind of like being the fastest out of a family of sloths.
Number 55. Home.
A slightly faster sloth, but still riddled with awful diseases, Home sees the return of Bran to the show because things weren't vague and pointless enough without him. We also meet Euron, which, great. Did we even need Euron? Couldn't Balon have just done all these things? There was rising tension between him and Yara anyway. I don't know, it just seems like we threw away a character we were already a little familiar with for someone brand new for no real reason. Anyway, Theon rolls his plot dice and decides he needs to go to Pike immediately. Fuck knows how he plans on getting that done. Ramsay kills his entire family, giving Roose a silly little death scene. For some reason, Davos is suddenly ride or die for Jon. Tyrion meets the dragons, which I hate because it led to a lot of people talking about one of my least favorite theories, but whatever, I guess it's not that terrible. King's Landing is slow as fuck. The best it's got going for it is this dick measuring between Jaime and Francis, and it's all just so pointless and meandering that I struggle to consider how anyone can call a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms filler and not this. To cap it all off, we have the resurrection and haircut of Jon Snow, nullifying any significance the previous season's finale had, as he is relatively unchanged by the experience. So why is it higher than the previous episode on my list? It's close, but this one has good old Ramsay being good old Ramsay, and the Theon Sansa farewell is pretty touching, albeit a little silly. For these reasons, Home rises just a smidge closer to the top of the dumpster.
Number 54. Blood of my blood.
The only good thing this episode has going for it is also the only good thing that happens in Braavos aside from Mace's singing, and that's the bloody handplay that Arya watches. Everything else in Blood of My Blood is dull at best, from Walder Frey's cartoonish unveiling of Edmure Tully as his prisoner, to the mind-numbing revelation that Benjen Stark is alive and contrived, to the excruciatingly boring return to Papa's shoe sermon room. Gilly at Hornhill is a little cute, and I love listening to James Faulkner's voice.
Is you getting back at me, boy?
But Randall's relative mercy to Sam for breaking his oaths and bringing a wildling into his home is mildly inexcusable. Sam's defiance in the theft of Heartsbane isn't bad, but it makes promises for the story that aren't ever fulfilled. Ace Tyrell marches an army into the middle of King's Landing to no effect, but at least he makes a neat speech. So much time is dedicated to this boring as fuck religious uprising just for it to be snuffed out without any clarity, but don't worry, we'll get to that soon. Jaime's dismissal from the Kingsguard just so we can deliver him to clean up Riverrun later is fucking dumb, and good lord, don't get me started on inspiring Daenerys speech number 43 after she happens to locate her dragon hiding behind a rock. She names literally the entire Dothraki horde her Blood Riders, which again promises plot points that are never delivered on. She echoes Drogo's epic speech from You Win or You Die, but it never hits the same intensity or passion. But hey, Sam's mum is nice, and we get to see Joffrey die again, so it's not all bad. For giving Richard E. Grant some scenery to chew on, Blood of My Blood gets to ride a horse up a staircase? Wait, how the fuck did he do that?
Number 53. Oathbreaker.
But Glidus, Jon's back, and we see Arthur Dayne fight. Alistair gets hanged. This episode is Pogtown, and you should be the mayor. No, don't be weird like that. Oathbreaker smells, and it smells of rushed setup. We need Rickon around for episode 9? Quick, throw him in at Winterfell. We need time travel to be a thing for the door? Quick, have Bran get past Ned's attention. We need to give Davos a reason to dedicate his life to Jon Snow. Oh, they didn't actually set that one up. We need Arthur Dayne to seem like a big deal even though he's only been mentioned once? I don't know, just give him 2 fucking swords, who cares? For some reason, Howland saving Ned's life is considered dishonorable. This is war, baby, anything goes. The old dude pulls Bran out of the flashback for no reason whatsoever, so the whole scene feels super random, like why the fuck were we here in the first place? Sure, the duel itself is a spectacle to behold, but it's total whomping bollocks. Bran has
heard the story 1,000 times,
yet somehow we never have. Vaes Dothrak is nothing like season 1 for some reason. Varys blackmails a sex worker, which is shockingly one of the least boring scenes in Meereen, but don't be too impressed by limboing under a 7-foot bar. The small council scene is actually kind of fun, which earns Oathbreaker a few points, though they're quickly thrown away by Tommen's chat with the Pope and Rocky's training montage. Do you like how they gave Rickon no lines because Art Parkinson's voice had already broken? Undead John's short-lived coldness and indifference is an interesting development that I really enjoy, and I can't blame this episode for completely dropping that facet of his personality. However, as vengeance for Ollie, I'm going to put Oathbreaker's head through the dryer. Also, Sam's on a ship.
What kind of god would have a pecker that small?
Number 52. The Winds of Winter.
I wish I could watch those first 23 minutes for the first time again. Production-wise, every moment from the first tolling of the bell to Tommen's death is undeniably, jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Though I had been disillusioned by the show for some time already and bored mindless by the plot leading up to this climax, the opening sequence of The Winds of Winter completely captivated me. Tommen's death is, as far as I'm concerned, the last truly beautiful moment of Game of Thrones. It was this dramatic, suspenseful, musical avalanche that saw a beloved character briefly return to sinister form. Finally, I was watching the show I fell in love with again. I could breathe. What an exhilarating, masterful scene. So why is this episode 52nd on the list and not like 10th? Everything about this sequence is perfect. Well, everything except the writing. But that would require getting too nitty and too gritty for this video. I'll cover it in the piss take before too long. I can and will dissect the writing of this scene and demonstrate where it falters, but there's no need for that when I can just point to, say, the rest of the episode to justify its placement. Okay, that's an exaggeration. Jamie being a prick to Walder Frey is also fun to watch, even though it's a little strange. And this one guy at the Citadel is fun, even though it's insane they didn't already know about J.L. Mormont's death when Tyrion knew before he left King's Landing. And yeah, look, Davos's rage at Melisandre is also great.
I loved that girl like she was my own.
But that's it. Varys bamboozles Olenna in Sunspear, and like everything about this scene sucks, but man, it looks pretty. And so does this scene where Dany dumps Dario for some reason. I haven't talked about direction and cinematography much in this video, but I just want to point out that Miguel Sapochnik makes beautiful things. Like, just look at this. And this. And this. Whatever happens in House of the Dragon, I'm sure it'll be pretty. Frey Pie happens and Arya kills the geezer before he even eats his sons. What's the point? The whole thing is cartoonish and laughable and I don't want to talk about it. Peter is weird to Sansa, but what else is new? Benno abandons Bran and Mira at the Walrus, where we learn that Jon is actually the son of, you know what, it isn't that important. The reveal is so good they decided to do it 2 more times before the show ended. He's named King in the North in the aftermath of Bastard Ball, which is strange because Jon lost the battle, is a bastard, and surely many people would still see him as a Night's Watch deserter, especially given that he isn't referred to as a religious figure. Rallying behind Sansa or Robin or even Peter would make much more sense, but that doesn't tick the wish fulfillment box. Whatever. Jaime returns to King's Rubble just in time for Cersei's equally nonsensical coronation. The episode concludes with Dany's amalgamated fleet swarming towards Westeros, complete with Varys by her side because that makes sense. So yes, there's a lot to love about the Winds of Winter, but there's also so much to hate. I'm softer on it now than I have been in the past, and perhaps that trend will continue, but for now, I'd prefer to watch any of the episodes above it on this list. Starting with, very narrowly might I add,
Number 51. The Dance of Dragons.
Oh dearie dearie, looks like venison's on the menu tonight. Hope you like it, Chard. The Dance of the Dragons is a strange episode. Off to a rough start with Sir Twenty Goodman's incredible pyromancy eviscerating Stannis' camp. You can't win me over with a Smiler reference. Stannis doesn't correct Davos when he says,
Found the 20 men, maybe less.
which puts the episode down a few pegs. Davos doesn't really push back when Stannis tells him to fuck off, allowing the thing to happen. But not before Shireen name drops the episode during her last adorable scene with Davos. Then, look, it could have been great. There could have been a way for this to be as tragic and heartbreaking a moment as Baelor or the Reigns of Castamere. I think the biggest missteps are Stannis' involvement and the wacky plot beats that lead to his desperation in the first place. And also, you know, the relative lack of impact it has. For some reason, Jon's brought all the free folk to Castle Black from the north instead of sailing to the south side of Eastwatch, which is pretty fucking dumb. Jaime and Doran try to address how silly this whole plot's been. This is like the only halfway decent scene in Dawn. Doran rocks, obviously.
Perhaps some soup instead.
But the whole thing is soured by Ilaria's childish behavior and the downright goofy circumstances that led us to this point. And the Sand Snakes. Arya finds Meryn and that whole thing gets started. It's not terrible setup for the finale, but the way the show characterizes this insurance dude is pretty stupid. I can appreciate all the production detail involved in Daznak's pit, but I can also hate everything that happens in it. They never really mastered how to make the dragonback shots convincing, and it looks pretty awful here. I'm not going to go into how ludicrous the ambush is, that's for another day. For failing to make the most of a potentially unforgettable moment, the Dance of the Dragons gets clobbered by the big dude.
Number 50. The Broken Man.
I do like a cold open. I do like the Hound. I do like Ian McShane. I do like Edmure. I don't like whatever the fuck this is supposed to be. Having defied an order of assassins, the Broken Man sees Arya brazenly and smugly galloping around Braavos before enduring the ultimate vibe check. The waif should have gone for the head, but honestly Arya should die from this shit either way. I fucking hate this scene and it's mutual. The High Sparrow continues to soak up screen time, but this bout of boring Sparrow scenes is probably the best simply because Marjorie shows the slightest glimpse of actually scheming at all. Jon's adventures is rallying the North are lackluster. The scene with the wildlings is the best of them because 1 won, and there's some notion of Jon as a religious figure.
He died for us.
Except it's not really framed that way, and it's entirely abandoned for the other scenes. I guess Lyanna calls Sansa Sandra, that's pretty cool.
And Lady Sandra is a Bolton.
Also a Lannister.
Lannister.
Sandra Lannister's continued resistance to using Peter's army infuriates me, but hey, Blackfish. You guys like the Blackfish, right? You like the Blackfish completely ignoring the motto of his house? Awesome. What else? You know, I guess I like the episode's title being woven into Sandor, Edmure, Jon, and Theon. Oh yeah, Theon. I have mixed feelings on this scene, but mainly it's filler that only serves to remind you where they're going. This is a weird episode, so for being so ballsy as to shove the Hound in our faces, the Broken Man can go for a lovely open wound swim through a disgusting canal.
Number 49. The Red Woman.
Diving headfirst into Davos' sudden undying love for Jon Snow's corpse, the Red Woman starts season 6 down an appropriately weird and ill-conceived track. After Alyssa Thorne confesses to treason, Ed fucks off to look for Tormund. Ramsay's grieving for Miranda is quite frankly a brilliant moment of characterization for him. Sure, he's a disgusting, brutal, evil monster, but he also genuinely loved and cared for this woman, and yet he's still a monster.
This is good meat. Feed it to the hounds.
This scene alone is enough to place it above what we've seen so far, which is pretty lucky because this episode doesn't have much else going for it. Theon and Sansa flee Winterfell and are saved by both Brienne and continuity errors. The fight is pretty fun, but I truly hate what it means for Brienne and how it demolishes the weight of her story. Pogdrick is pretty epic though, that's fine, and the oath to Sansa is kinda cute. Cersei's grieving for Myrcella is great because Lena, but it's undercut by the insanity going underway in Dawn, and in King's Landing, and in Meereen, oh god.
Misa means mother in Valerian.
No, it fucking doesn't. You have the Conlanger on staff. Why did this happen? Dany's fleet burns just so she has a reason to need ships later on. The Super Dario bros track Dany, and even though the premise is dumb, I rather like their dynamic. Dany's travels with Moro are mostly just disappointing reminders of how cool Drogo was. Always good to see Arya beaten up a little, of course. Alyssa confronts Davos and co, which itself isn't bad. Then we learn that Melisandre is old. Great. For wasting Alexander Siddig's time, the Red Woman is good meat, feed it to the hounds.
Number 48. Sons of the Harpy.
You may think I've been harsh on Meereen, so to be fair to Sons of the Harpy, let's keep an open mind and see what it has on offer. Cool. A fan-favorite badass gets an unearned, unceremonious death. This is only one step above an off-screen death. You know, we've also got celebrity power couple Jaime and Bronn arriving on Dawn, complete with talk to the hand, Cersei fucking predicting the future in a small council meeting, Lancel's fake-ass headscar, Peter somehow knows how to get into the Winterfell crypts, and his entire plan is either a drug-fueled haze on his behalf or an extreme contrivance on the writer's behalf. Stannis is the favorite to win, but Peter's allied himself with Roose for some reason. Ilaria has been ruined, Obara Sand gives an off-the-charts cringy speech, Tommen and Marjorie have a falling out over how much of a little bitch he is. Okay, so that's not great, but there's actually quite a lot to enjoy in Sons of the Harpy, like Tyrion's Inquisition of Jorah, perhaps the last moment Tyrion's intellect is actually used for anything. Slap. The You Are My Daughter scene is beautiful, and remember that I said I'm not docking points for future episodes ruining good scenes. And you know what, Castle Black is pretty fine in this one. Jon rejects Mel's seduction out of his love for Ygritte. It's a shame that gets dropped later. The Sparrow sacking Peter's brothel is a little silly, but it's good to see something actually happening in King's Landing. And much as I hate the scenes around these speeches, I do quite like hearing about Harrenhal and Rhaegar. For constantly flip-flopping in quality, Sons of the Harpy gets stabbed in an alleyway.
Number 47. High Sparrow.
The incomprehensibly idiotic move of handing Sansa to the Boltons would be enough to plummet High Sparrow down this list, but let's see what else it's got for us. King's Landing is actually pretty alright, with Tommen's wedding, Can We Break the Record, and this subtextually rich moment between Cersei and Marjorie.
I wish we had some wine for you. It's a bit early in the day for us.
The High Septon has entirely the wrong taste in sex workers. We get to see some old man butt crack, but then the council meeting is fine.
It doesn't matter.
Interesting conversation with the High Sparrow before Cersei sends a very confusing message to Peter. The trend of horrendously boring scenes in the House of Black and White begins here, so that's shit, but at least we get some good one-worders out of it.
What?
Constant vagaries to establish mystery that neither captures my attention nor goes anywhere. Brienne's a dick to Pod while they go around Moat Cailin, which just, ugh, but things get better when their talk turns to Renly. Roose announces his rebellion to the crown for a laugh. Theon's fear of Sansa is cool, but Peter's conversations with both Roose and Renly Ramsay drill holes in my brain. Tyrion gets kidnapped at a Volantine brothel after failing to get it up, Qyburn does some spooky things in his spooky lab, and this has all been pretty rocky. Why is this episode better than, say, The Red Woman?
Ollie, bring me my sword.
Castle Black this episode is an absolute machine. Stannis comes to Jon with his Winterfell offer, which is great, and then of course the death of Janos Slynt is pure catharsis. Jon taking charge just does something to me, I guess. No homo. A little homo. For handing me off to the house that killed my family, I'm gonna give High Sparrow my shoes.
Number 46. The Gift.
If I were to tell you that this episode's placement had nothing to do with tie-in sandbags, you'd peg me for a liar immediately. This episode isn't better than High Sparrow, and yet here it is. The Gift is mostly baffling, but there's some alright stuff in here, like Stannis refusing to burn Shireen even though everything happens to Stannis, Sam and Ghost's rescue of Gilly, Cersei's torment of Marjorie, and of course the best scene by a wide margin, Aemon's death.
I dreamed that I was old.
It's honestly great. Jaime and Myrcella have classic dad and teenage daughter energy. The scene with the slavers is mostly cool, but then Tyrion gets himself out of the pickle by beating a guy up, which is kinda weird. Jon leaves for Hardhome, that's fine, but then there's like these crazy scenes with Olenna with both the High Sparrow and Peter. Peter continues epitomizing the flimsiness of season 5's story, Alistair is weird, Lancel showing up to see Cersei is one of the cheesiest things this show ever does, and Dany doesn't listen to her manstress advice. Alfie carries a scene as is tradition, and Jorah temporarily doesn't have grayscale for the duration of this scene. The fight's alright, but the Tyrion thing is, yeah, I called the episode baffling, didn't I? Of course, the bafflingest is what happens in the cells down in Dorne, so for giving me a taste of the Dornishman's wife, the Gift is inflicted with a poison that activates only when it's relevant to the plot.
Number 45. The House of Black and White.
Oh boy, is this the beginning of a new, exciting adventure for Arya in an exotic locale? The House of Black and White sets a precedent for the House of Black and White, making no sense. We don't want you. Okay, we want you. But then later on they don't want her? Oh my god. Brienne tries to take Sansa from Peter and it goes about as well as you'd think. Sansa tells her to go fuck, then several men die for no reason at all. Great. Cersei receives a threatening package from Dawn and she's decided it's so effective that she sets up the whole thing again so that Jaime can experience it. Jaime just like randomly declares that he's gonna go get Myrcella, kickstarting a plot I think we all know my feelings about. He ruins Bronn's life for this plot, by the way.
Jaime fucking Lannister.
Please stop ruining Doran and Ilaria, please. In Marine, Dario stabs a curtain because he understands fear. Mosador is a character, and because he's an idiot, Dany executes him. Okay, this all sounds pretty unconvincing, but King's Landing hasn't gone to shit yet with a fun council scene, Kevin is great, and I guess the dwarf heads thing in Qyburn's creepy lab is alright. But mostly what carries this episode is, again, Castle Black.
I know S.
Selyse is racist, Stannis 1v1s Jon, Arya, the Wildlings, and there's the Mormont letter, and of course there's Jon's election to Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. For loitering on my doorstep, I don't want the House of Black and White. Wait, yes I do. Wait, no I don't.
Number 44. Breaker of Chains.
Joffrey's bloated corpse is one hell of an image to begin an episode with. Breaker of Chains is largely framed around figuring out who killed Joffrey, and I think the best it gets is this scene with Podrick in a cape where Tyrion tries to figure it out. He doesn't quite make it, but it's still a fun one with a touching farewell. Peter kills Dontos after Sansa is delivered.
He was a drunk and a fool, and I don't trust drunk fools.
Okay, so why did you include him in your plan when surely there was someone more reliable you could have had do this? Olenna and Marjorie talk about their husbands' deaths before we get Grampy Tywin counseling Tommen over his brother's corpse, and he invents Orys the First for some reason. I like the lesson he's teaching, but the speech itself is a little wonky. Bit of wonk on that one. Then, oh, it's this scene. I keep forgetting that this actually happens, and I'm pretty okay with that. What a weird, disgusting blotch on the show with no justification. So yeah, this episode is pretty good if you take this bit out, but for some reason HBO didn't do that. Arya and Sandor have a cute time meeting this little family. I hope they can get along. Oh no. The Slayer sends Gilly away, good setup for later in the season. Stannis is super fucking mad at Davos for releasing Gendry, but he's chuffed that Joffrey's dead. Davos has no clue how to find money, so it's lucky that Shireen's reading lesson reminds him that banks exist. Oberyn explains bisexual energy to Oliver, but Tywin interrupts and their conversation is great. Ollie gets traumatized and goes to the Watch. Jon wants to root out the mutineers. It's a little contrived, but not terrible. The dick measuring at Meereen gets a special place in my heart as the first scene I ever saw, but for turning Belwas shit into Dario's piss, Breaker of Chains' mother was a hamster and its father smelt of elderberries.
Number 43. The Children.
If Season 5's Dawn plot was the ceremonial shark jumping of this show, then surely Sandor Clegane's leisurely stumble off a cliff in The Children marks at least a short hop over a mid-sized dolphin. Let's start with the good though, the aftermath of Watchers. Jon treats with Mance and they remember their fallen before Stannis attacks and is generally a badass. Jon, Stannis, and Mance together is fucking sick. Aemon farewells the dead, Melisandre is sus, then Jon and Tormund is pretty good too as he tells Jon to take Ygritte where she belongs. Tywin commands Cersei to marry Loras and she confesses the twincest thing, which is pretty epic. I like quite a lot of Tyrion's escape, and Arya leaving for Braavos is exciting, but it's fucking dumb that Value Magouli's is treated like a secret code of some kind. Daenerys chaining Rhaegal and Viserion works pretty well, and I want to commend the Dragon team for this scene. But Mom! And of course, Qyburn and Pycelle tend to Gregor.
This is my laboratory.
This is my laboratory!
Okay, now the bad. Bran's arrival at the cave is fucking dumb and I hate it for reasons too plentiful to discuss right at this moment. Jojen dies, I guess, and Stru and Roger is our Raven dude for just this moment. Brienne magically stumbles across Arya. The conflict with Sandor begins over Brienne's sword, even though she has an explanation for it, but whatever, it's fight time. Every episode's gotta have a big fight in it. Again, my disdain for this scene is too multifaceted for this video, so for now it's edited like arse and makes little sense. Brienne wins for plot reasons and Podrick loses Arya just like all the other horses. I do like Sandor's begging for death and Arya's cold abandoning of him though. I said I wouldn't be comparing to the books, so I can't deride The Children just for not including the Tysha reveal, and I guess the issues this poses don't actually eventuate for a while, so for being such a complicated episode, I'm gonna have to seek a second opinion for The Children.
My favourite episode to film was actually there was one at the end of season 4, and it's when the Baratheons arrive at the wall. And that was my favourite because before then I'd only ever filmed with one person maximum at a time. And I kind of just walked into the set and there were so many people and so many cast members and I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never filmed anything where there were so many people with like extras and stuff. And yeah, it was just really cool. And I found out that there was a sweet van as well, which was really cool as well. So that was one of my favourites to film.
Thanks, Kerry. I wonder what it's like to be that positive.
Number 42. Kill the boy.
Barristan's dead, Dany goes all heresy, immolating some random dudes because she feels like it. Wormo likes Missandei, then Dany agrees to open the fighting pits and marry Hizdahr. Meereen is pretty loopy and kill the boy, so let's see what else is going on. Tyrion and Jorah sail through Valyria, where the Stone Men are, I guess, and they spot Drogon before all this happens. Don't know how they made it out, but Jorah Connington is an interesting development. Fortunately for this episode, the rest of it takes place in the north. Castle Black remains pog as fuck with some killer, memorable moments.
Kill the boy, Jon Snow. Easy thing to say to a man in chains. A Targaryen, alone in the world. It's a terrible thing.
Fear. What?
Sam talks Randall with Stannis before the king leaves, which is all pretty good. Winterfell is, okay, it's not all good news in the north. Brienne somehow gets a message in without compromising her position, but hey, look at Alfie go. Walder is pregnant and Roose gets a pretty cute moment with Ramsay.
You are my son.
They're gonna defend Winterfell together. Aww. Ramsay has evil sex with his evil girlfriend. Sansa meets Theon in the kennels, which is a little dumb, so for sparing me of more boring King's Landing, Braavos, or Dawn bullshit, Kill the Boy gets conveniently placed grayscale.
Number 41. Mother's Mercy.
Like any season finale, Mother's Mercy sees a bunch of plots reaching some conclusion or turning point. Unfortunately, because season 5 is a weird, boring, unfocused mess, many of these beats come off as rushed, unfulfilling, or plain fucking dumb. The best of them are clearly Cersei's Walk of Shame, which might be season 5's best scene, and the mutiny at Castle Black, which saw enough time devoted to its build-up to be genuinely sensible. And though throwing Benjen into the mix was a little left field, it isn't egregious by any means. Beyond this though, there's Arya's gratuitous vengeance of Syrio and subsequent blinding, the culmination of a season's worth of boring nonsense and inconsistent motivations. The conclusion of the Dawn plot sees a touching moment between father and daughter before Illaria's extremely obvious plot actually eventuates for once. The Meereen weenies try to figure out what to do for the next season and fail miserably. Varys fucking apparates next to Tyrion even though I thought he hated magic. Dany doesn't have dysentery, which I guess is for the best, but she's weirdly encircled by a random Khalasar because Drogon hunky and seepy. Oh, and Jon sends Sam to the Citadel, which I guess makes sense following Aemon's death, but the worst part of the episode is the awful conclusion of the Stannis story. Ramsay decides to meet him in the field for no reason, bit of a trend he started there, and King Stannis Baratheon, the greatest military commander alive, isn't even in formation when the battle begins. I hate this. Sansa's escape and Theon's redemption with Miranda's death works out fine, and I like how Brienne is forced to choose between her oath and enacting vengeance for Renly, even though that's ruined in the very next episode. Stannis' bravery is admirable, but does little to counteract how laughable the scene as a whole is. The cutaway execution is not only out of character, but also bothersome from a narrative perspective. For the watch, this episode gets the bad pussy.
Number 40. Oathkeeper.
Maybe I just have a sour taste in my mouth from all the marine that comes after it, but Oathkeeper's capture of the city just rubs me the wrong way. There's graffiti written in common for some reason, and the last shot with the pyramid and the banner looks like shit. Fortunately, Oathkeeper is done with marine within 10 minutes. Bronn bitch slaps Jaime with his own hand, which is pretty cool. These scenes are alright. For no reason, Peter tells Sansa that he killed Joffrey for no reason. Then, also for no reason, Olenna tells Marjorie that she killed Joffrey, but she actually had a reason. She's more telling the audience than Marge, because why would you tell Marge? Mad Snake Locke arrives at Castle Black. Janos tells Alliser that nobody likes him and that he should get rid of Jon, which is actually decent motivation for letting Jon go to Craster's. Nice. Cersei is crabby towards Jaime and gets annoyed when he says he wouldn't kill Sansa. Marge meets Tommen and oh, look at this kitty. The scene is cute when you forget about the actors' ages. Brienne's reward for reading a boring book is a fancy sword to help Sansa. Jaime is cool, but you could have helped Sansa when she was, there. Brienne also gets a Podrick. Hooray! Jon gathers a few folks to take Craster's back with him. Ed's a total trooper. Carl fucking Tanner is great.
I was a fucking legend.
After Bran's crew fails miserably at being sneaky, some blue dude takes Craster's last son to this crazy fucking ice fortress where we meet the Night King. Whoa. So none of the scenes themselves are actually terrible outside of Meereen, but most things that happen in Oathbreaker are questionable. For introducing the true Azor Ahai to the show, I'm willing to forgive Oathkeeper's missteps. So the last few episodes weren't actually all that bad, because we're now entering the part of the list where things get good quickly. Placement of episodes is going to start to seem very narrow as the show's quality is more or less consistent from this point on. But I had to give every episode a number, so feel free to think of these as being in basically one big equal place if you want, as the order they're in here can be down to petty preferences or arbitrary whims. Starting with...
Number 39. The Wars to Come.
Breaking the growing trend of beginning seasons with cold opens, The Wars to Come falters early with its failure to account for Cersei's fourth child in Maggie's prophecy, which may seem like a nitpick, but consider that this is framed as the cornerstone memory that forms Cersei's paranoia, which influences her every action this season. There's no reason for it to not be accurate, seeing as they altered other parts of the prophecy. The rest of the scene is good, but this issue is one of the chips that later form a large crack across the windshield of this show's integrity. Oh yeah, Tywin's dead. So this episode is all about establishing the new order of things, with Tyrion exiled, Mance defeated, the Sparrows in the capital, Dany solidifying her rule of Meereen, and Peter on the go, I guess. Tywin's wake is fun, if only because of Loras' awkward small talk to Cersei, and Kevin is back. The return of Lancel is fine too, making use of past plot points to develop a mostly forgotten character in an unexpected way. Marjorie walks in on her brother doing a sex, and it has issues, but whatever. Tyrion's wallowing is fine, though it's strange that Illyrio isn't at Illyrio's home. Varys outs himself as a Targaryen fanboy, raising pertinent questions one could reasonably call plot holes that aren't addressed until over 2 seasons later. Dany's kids have gone nuts, but don't worry, they'll turn out fine somehow. Also, the unsullied brothel murders start, I guess. And finally, we arrive at the death of Mance Rayder. Great character, great actor, great final scene, great send-off. For providing me with this clip, I'm not going to push The Wars to Come down a well.
Number 38. Hardhome.
I know this one is a lot of people's mega favorite, and here I am putting it basically in the middle of the list. Let me explain why I don't hyper love Hardhome. Well, first, let him explain why he does.
Certainly one of my favourite episodes to film. That whole experience of being down by the quarry and being chased by the undead. Also, when we were making it, I knew it was going to be like a really good episode because it came out of nowhere. It was about 40 minutes or something with the usual sort of dialogue and ponderous interchange, and then we went up to Hardhome, and then this white cloud appeared over the hill, and then just this onslaught, this absolutely unexpected onslaught. I thought it was really good because with a lot of things, you don't see them coming in life. And that was a little bit like that. You didn't expect that suddenly at the end of episode 8, 20 minutes from the end, this huge massacre was about to take place. So I loved that.
Thanks, Ben. He's totally right. Hard Home, The Battle is an epic moment that just erupts out of a run-of-the-mill episode. However, I'm not here to review Hard Home, The Battle. I'm talking about Hard Home, the episode. And run-of-the-mill for Season 5 isn't much to write home about. So yeah, it sits above the rest of Season 5 for The Battle, but the rest of it still is Season 5, you know? Like the scene in the pyramid where Tyrion meets Daenerys and Jorah's there too, that's pretty dumb. Anella torturing Cersei is okay, but it relies heavily on Lena's carrying ability. There's more nonsense in Bravos, the waif is insane as usual. Sansa learns that her brothers are still alive, not that one though. Roose holds council and Ramsay sends his good friend Sir 20 Goodman to deal with Stannis. Either Daenerys or the writers have no self-awareness during this conversation, and I can't tell which. Then we get Break the Wheel, which a lot of people like, and I'm not one of them. Sam accidentally tells Ollie to kill Jon while explaining how altruism works. Hard Home itself has issues, but those are for another time, and I'll never dispute how strong this ending is. But for tricking everyone into thinking it's a great episode, I'm going to break Hard Home's wheels and cut its brakes.
Number 37. First of his name.
Okay, now we're cooking with gas. First of His Name is a good episode. The one problem I have with it is Tywin declaring that the entire mining industry in the Westerlands has gone dry, which is this ludicrous plot point that is only ever lampshaded going forward. Besides that, it's all pretty good. Dany makes the choice to stay in Meereen, not knowing how boring it's going to be, and her reasoning is good enough, I guess, with the rest of her conquests in Slaver's Bay already falling back to their old ways. Tommen's crowning is good fun, the Bloody Gate is a thing, and we finally reached Lysa. She's insane and it's great. I'm not a fan of how this episode needlessly spoils that Lysa killed Jon Arryn when that would have been much more dramatic a reveal 2 episodes later. Kinda tells of pacing issues to come. Brienne and Podrick's relationship deepens a little, which is great. Sandor mocks Syrio for being killed by Meryn, fair. Oberyn and Cersei discuss their daughters, and it's really good. The showdown at Craster's is actually really well structured now that we're actually here. Things go from completely in Tanner's control to absolute chaos very quickly, but it's all established in such a way that it maintains coherence. Thomas Brodie Sangster is great, the Locke deception is handled well, and of course I love the boss fight. Rast is killed by Ghost, Bran resolves to leave Jon and go north, and the wives burn down Craster's keep. Pretty good ending to a pretty tolerable episode. For being, like, not terrible, First of His Name gets a pat on the— Wait, you didn't skin the rabbit, you fucking idiot!
Number 36. And now his watch is ended.
Oh, hello, Season 3. And Now His Watch Has Ended is a good episode, but it's not great. I try to judge each episode as isolated as possible, but it's not lost on me that this one has the poor fortune of being sandwiched between 2 excellent episodes. We're now at a point where to truly criticize the episodes, I have to go into really finicky nitpicks, like how Joffrey says that Rhaenyra's remains are in the crypts beneath Baelor's Sept, even though it was built over 40 years after her death, or like Brienne chastising Jaime's worldview as though she isn't also a pampered highborn. And even those have asterisks attached to them, which weaken the criticism. Theon tells some guy he's just met the incredibly sensitive information that Bran and Rickon are alive, I guess. That could have been better. The rest is fine work. Jaime's torment shows his great pride and resolve. Varys has a sorcerer's ship express from Essos and susses out Peter's plans for Sansa. Joffrey gets a taste of popular praise. Cersei confronting Tywin about her prospects makes for a great scene.
I distrust you because you're not as smart as you think you are.
Varys cucks Peter in a beautiful way, and this dynamic between him and Olenna is great. Girl talk with Marjorie and Sansa is good shit. It's all good shit, man. And then there's the mutiny at Craster's and Sam's flight with Gilly and her newborn. The Brotherhood interrogates the Hound, and Dany bloods the Unsullied early. It's a good sign that an episode this relatively consistent is this far down the list. For reminding me that this show was actually fucking phenomenal, I apologize for the placement of "and now his watch is ended." There's just too many good episodes. Such as...
Number 35. The Old Gods and the New.
Nothing at all wrong with this one, it just kind of blends into the background. The focal point for me in The Old Gods and the New is Harrenhal, with some delicious Grandpa Tywin scenes. Peter shows up, which is fun for Arya. Tywin tells her about Jaime's learning disability, lmao, and Amory has to die. Jon with Corran is alright too, with the capture and failed execution of Ygritte. Theon captures Winterfell and then beheads Roderick because he's an idiot. Osha later escapes with the boys, wolves, and Hodor. The riot of King's Landing proves Sandor's strange sense of duty and complicates Sansa's perception of him. Cat returns to Robb, who is learning about... Anyway, he puts Roose's boy in charge of retaking Winterfell. Oops. It's all pretty good, but for stealing my dragons, the old gods and the new get strangled to death off screen.
Number 34. Garden of Bones.
There's a bunch of fucked up shit in Garden of Bones, like Joffrey's torment of Sansa and then these sex workers, the horrifying torture practices at Harrenhal, Melisandre's sneaky shadow lad, this battlefield amputation, the Garden of Bones itself, and Marge's ice cream cone dress, and of course the most scathing insult of the whole series.
Ornament salt and smoke. Is he a ham?
Rob's instant googly eyes for Talisa are a little strange, as are the 13, but so much of this episode is great. The tension building up to the Battle of Oxcross, Tyrion's rescue of Sansa, the genesis of Grampy Tywin, Kat's hatred of Peter and the futility of her trying to de-escalate the Baratheon conflict, and yeah, the realization of the fuckery Melisandre is capable of. The standout character this episode is Tyrion, not only for saving Sansa and pooping on Meryn,
the next time Sir Meryn speaks, kill him,
but also for this incredibly fun, quick, and clever scene where he blackmails Lancel. However, it appears that someone has pissed in Hot Pie's pants, so for that, Garden of Bones will have to be amputated. Very sexily, though.
Number 33. Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things.
Season 1 had to show up somewhere for the first time, I guess. Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things is not a bad episode by any means, aside from maybe camera work, but it is the least good episode of Season 1. We meet Sam, wow, and Janos Slynt shows up for the first time. Oh, and Gendry. King's Landing is mostly a fun ride with Ned investigationating Jon Arryn's death, but there's also this scene where Mordain and Sansa are weirdly alone in the throne room, Jory and Jaime making chit-chat outside Robert's harem to give their fight next episode more weight, and of course the death of fan-favourite character Sir Hugh of the Vale, who we also met this episode. Peter is weird to Sansa, Pycelle's old, and this one where Cersei assesses Ned is great. I love Vaes Dothrak, but that's just me. You know how I love a man who's completely delusional.
This is my army.
For capturing my brother in an inn, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things might be getting a knife through the eye soon. No, that's not me.
Number 32. The Nightlands.
Yep, it's pretty good.
Number 31. Mockingbird.
In the aftermath of Tyrion's trial, the Lannister boys try to sort out what's gonna happen. We're reintroduced to the Mountain, this time played by Hafthor, in a kinda weird scene where he's just hacking randos up. Much of Mockingbird is brilliantly framed around Tyrion trying to find someone to fight the Mountain for him. Jaime visits him, Bronn visits him, and after Sandor exposits about Gregor elsewhere, Oberyn visits Tyrion for a truly epic conversation. By condensing a few different scenes the two share in the book into one scene, so much emotion and drama is packed into this one conversation.
I will be your champion.
It's such a fucking epic Pog moment. It would be great to end the episode on, but it's called Mockingbird, and there's an even better moment waiting for us. Perhaps the last cool thing Peter does, Lysa's death is undercut by first of his name having spoiled to reveal that Lysa killed Jon Arryn, and yet it's still incredibly strong and dramatic. The whole sequence at the Eyrie builds to this moment, as does Lysa's mental state across the first season, and the shock satisfies without fail because this plot is actually significant. Looking at you, the door. So it sounds like I love this episode. Why is it all the way up here? I mean, the rest isn't awful, it's good, but few episodes can remain this cool for the whole runtime. Castle Black sees a compelling exploration of strategy in preparation for the upcoming battle. That's cool. The Hound kills an old guy and Arya kills Rorge. Meereen sucks and Melisandre is naked, without the necklace, and not ancient. So for giving up on the gravy, Mockingbird gets to go skydiving.
Number 30. The North Remembers.
It always struck me as a strange decision to open Season 2 on Joffrey's name day tourney, but I guess the North Remembers does this to establish what things are like at the season's prime location. Joffrey's cruelty continues, Sansa's will has been crushed, and Dontos exists, but then Tyrion's arrival is a reprieve from all the horror. Tyrion's time as Hand of the King begins here, and I love it thoroughly. The Comet ties together a lot of this episode, and I kind of wish they'd steered into it even more. Daenerys struggles with her ragtag Khalasar refined, the Watch arrives at Craster's. I've always loved Mormont's speech to Jon here, and of course we meet the one true king. Poor Cresson. Robb interrogates Jaime and sends Alton to King's Landing. Grey Wind is a good boy. He sends Theon to treat with Balon too. Oops. I've always loved how the end uses Joffrey's massacre of Robert's bastards to remind us where Gendry is on the road with Yoren and Arya. For slapping me in the face, the North Remembers could be put to death.
Number 29. Dark Wings, Dark Words.
For an episode where nothing happens, a lot happens in Dark Wings' dark words. Catelyn learns that her father and sons are dead, not realizing that it's just a prank, bro. She later makes one of these things and tells Talisa the sick baby John story, which people have opinions about. It contextualizes her intense guilt and further complicates a relationship that saw literally one scene of screen time. Wow, that's actually really cool. Karstark is pissed that they're going to Riverrun for Hoster's funeral, which is Pharaoh. Jaime and Brienne meet Old Mate, who later sells them out, which eventuates after a pretty decent fight on a bridge. Joffrey is stylish as fuck, and between this scene, Olenna's excellent introduction, and Brienne's chats, a lot of this episode is weirdly about Renly. Cool. We meet Jojen and Mira. I've always loved that the first thing Jojo does is pacify Summer. It's a great indication of what his demeanor is. Arya and Co are captured by the Brotherhood. Angai is a bro, and later they bring in Sandor, who recognizes Arya. Some stuff happens north of the wall, I guess. For introducing two powerful queens to the show, Dark Wings' dark words gets tortured by my bastard.
Number 28. Two Swords.
Continuing the trend of cold opens for season premieres, Two Swords starts season 4 strong. Reforging Ice is brilliant, resourceful storytelling, so it bothers me that when these two swords are reunited in seasons to come, no point is made of Ice being made whole again. When Tywin gifts one to Jaime, there's no talk of Bright Roar, which is strange because it is in the show canon. He wants his son out of the Kingsguard as though that's a thing. Tyrion greets the Dornish, which serves for a great non-intrusive introduction to Dorne and to Oberyn, as he's not there. He's busy wrecking shit up at a brothel, and this is exposition heavy, but it's good shit, adding more depth to established events and making use of a fantastic performance. We meet new Dario, Tyrion fails at consoling Sansa, Shae is confusing and I hate her, and a Cersei spy overhears her. Cersei's mean to Jaime, now with new hand, but her resentment is understandable. Jaime does nothing about Sansa, which is a shame because this was going so well. The Thenns really aren't that intimidating. Jon goes on trial and gets to be all sassy to Janos, which is great. Aemon lets him off the hook because he's a Chad. Brienne introduces herself to Olenna and Marjorie as though she wasn't Kingsguard to Marge's husband. Joffrey looks dapper and accuses Jaime of being non-pog. Dany wants to look at dead children. We re-meet Dontos, which is fine, again some resourceful storytelling, and then the obvious best moment.
I understand that if any more words come pouring out your mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every fucking chicken in this room.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Still don't know what the fuck a lummy is though. For singing a song I don't like too loudly, Two Swords will be dismissed from the Kingsguard.
Number 27. A Man Without Honor.
While the titular line is explicitly in reference to Jaime, A Man Without Honor is one of the most applicable titles of any episode. Jaime, of course, but then there's Theon and Sandor, Xaro, and perhaps even Rickard Karstark or Joffrey, which is incredible because he's not even in this episode. Jaime even alludes to Ned Stark's apparent wavering honor. I just love the deep reference of the title. Anyway, it's real good, except there's some Talisa going on, and look man, it's not just because they changed it from the books. She genuinely poses problems for the show independent of the source material. Anyway, Theon's incompetence and horniness leads to Bran and Rickon's escape, which is kind of the through line of the episode, as we return to the hunt later and end the episode with the crisped bodies. I really like the way this is played. The most attentive of viewers will notice what happened, but if you're not watching with a magnifying glass, then you'll go through the same emotions Luwin does. The most important part of this is that we don't see the boys alive until the end of the next episode when Luwin finds them. At this point, the show knows how not to spoil its own plots. Looking at you, first of his name, and also Beyond the Walrus. Kat's argument with Rickard Karstark after Jaime kills his son is fantastic, and I similarly love Kat's treatment of the Kingslayer.
And gag him!
There's also a pointless Quaithe scene, so that's kind of weird. For killing its own cousin, A Man Without Honor is forced to love a monster. Oh, I also love this Tyrion and Cersei scene. Okay, I'm done.
Number 26. The Climb.
I really like how this episode keeps cutting back to Jon's ascent of the Walrus, because it's an exciting plot, but probably not exciting enough to be one continuous segment, right? So it can start out setting up everything in the north and tell a contained story in a single episode about the climb, which leads to this beautiful ending framed around Peter's metaphorical climb.
Chaos is a ladder.
Tywin and Olenna's fight over who marries who makes brilliant usage of the show's decision to roll Willis, Garland, and Loras Tyrell into one character. Instead of naming him to the Kingsguard as an act of good faith, it's a threat. Cersei and Tyrion share a shockingly amicable scene about Joffrey, Mandon Moore, and Jaime. The Freys give Robb terms for an alliance, and Edmure takes one for the team after his uncle bullies him a little. Theon plays Who Am I with Ramsay, somehow not realizing that he literally is the Bolton Sigil. The elephant in the room is Melisandre's excursion to the Riverlands to give Gendry Edric Storm's plot. The Stannis plot and the Arya plot get momentarily fused with little care. I know that she's vaguely magical, but some grounded explanation of how she tracked Gendry would have gone a long way. At least they make the most of it by letting her speak with Thoros and Beric about resurrection, not that it really matters in the long run. Then there's the closing eyes thing, which is later misappropriated as foreshadowing for Arya killing the Night King, which of course I hate. So for being a well-structured episode forced to endure one ugly stain, it's always gonna be an uphill battle, and sometimes the climb is gonna have to lose.
Number 25. The Prince of Winterfell.
Given that penultimate episodes are often largely dedicated to single events, those that come before them often bear the burden of setting the stage for the finale. The Prince of Winterfell accomplishes this with flying colours. For a remarkably action-free episode, the drama building towards the battle at King's Landing and the climax at Winterfell carries it phenomenally. The standout scene for me is Tyrion, Bronn, and later Varys trying to plan the city's defense, with this fun little through line of how to pronounce this maester's name.
Shevelethan. Sheveletesh.
And ending with Tyrion's declaration of using pig shit. But Luwin spotting Osha at the very end is too sweet to not get a mention. The beginning of Jaime and Brienne's relationship is good fun, Karstark's rage is great, Arya's mad rush to find Jaqen as Tywin leaves Harrenhal is... I mean, she still could have named him anyway, but I guess she's all about instant gratification here. Damn kids and their iPads. Stannis intends to name Davos his hand in this fantastic scene. Jorah wants to leave Karth, but sticks around because he loves Dany. Gren finds the dragon glass at the Fist. You see what I mean when I say this is laying all the seeds for an epic finale? Corran lays the seeds for Jon joining the Free Folk, Tyrion plays along with Cersei thinking Ros is his whore, and unfortunately Talisa shares her backstory and Robb is a bonehead. For killing all the ravens, the Prince of Winterfell is doing more favours for Valar Morghulis than for itself.
Number 24. The Laws of Gods and Men.
Tyrion's trial is pretty fucking sick, and the more time devoted to it the better, because the Laws of Gods and Men doesn't quite know how to handle anything else. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but really, how else am I supposed to react when shirtless Ramsay Snow keeps an entire platoon of Ironborn at bay? And I know she announced it quite a while back, but still, the prospect of Yara sailing from Pike to the Dreadfort is fucking ludicrous. And then, after all that, she gives up pretty damn easily. Baffling scene, good speech though. If Daenerys is staying in Meereen to learn how to rule, then why is nobody telling her how terrible a job she's doing? Poor Hisdar and Hisdar's dead dad. Stannis and Davos kicking it up in Braavos is great, and it's a shame that this is Salador's last scene. Tywin forges Jorah's pardon, Oberyn and Varys have an interesting go of it, that's quirky. Some other shit happens, then it's trial time, baby. And yeah, it's good. You thought Shae was gone, but the twist is she's not gone. Incredible. Jaime bargaining with Tywin is great, as is the final speech, of course. Horrible idea, but man, it's fun in the moment, isn't it? For burning my goats, I should have let the laws of gods and men kill you all.
Number 23. Misa.
Marred by the imagery of its final scene, Misa is still pretty fucking good. That's Mother in Giscari, by the way, not Valyrian. After a coda to the Red Wedding, including Robb, now with Grey Wind's head, we get one of my favourite council meetings. That there are so many memorable quotes here is indicative of how well handled this drama is.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
I'm not tired!
And while I am a big fan of
monsters are dangerous, and just now kings are dying like flies.
It doesn't carry so well seeing as only Robb has died recently and not Balon. This also affects Stannis' confidence in the Gendry leeches, which I count as a bit of a problem. But there's more good before there's more bad, with one of my favourite lines in the series.
Hodor.
I've always loved how the Ratcook story about violating guest right cuts directly to Walder and Roose. This scene itself leads directly to Ramsay with his shaky sausage. So many memorable moments in this one, though I've never liked how he pulls the name Reek out of thin air. Bran meets Sam and Gilly, but they take some convincing before letting them through the wall. Varys tries to get rid of Shae, and while it doesn't work, I can still thank him for trying. I love the Cersei Tyrion scene where she's sympathetic to Sansa. Arya kills a man, Jon gets shot by his girlfriend, Jaime finally returns to King's Landing, and man, what a day this is for Cersei. Sam and then Jon arrive at Castle Black and Aemon sends ravens across the realm. One of those ravens makes it to Davos, who tries to convince Stannis to let Gendry go. But if you want something done, you do it yourself. That all sounds pretty fucking great, but for sending me my son's dick in the mail, Misa gets this weird white savior vibe going on. I really don't like that last scene, probably the worst of any season. Yeah, I mean any season.
Number 22. Second Sons.
Sandor, Tyrion, Stannis, and of course the mercenary company itself, Second Sons makes the most of its title. Though I much prefer Michelle Huisman's Dario to Ed Skreens, this episode offers the character a strong introduction. Daenerys wants unloyal sellswords on her side, okay, but getting past the premise, the rest of the plot is pretty good. I quite like this first scene where Miro treats with Dany, rip. Arya gives killing Sandor a crack before he tells her where they're actually going, which is a cute way of keeping us up to date with the Robb plot. The Stark-Lannister wedding is such a fucked up circumstance, but they still make it pretty cute, putting Tyrion at perhaps his most likable.
And so my watch begins.
Always good to see Joffrey put in his place. The convo between Stannis and Davos is great. Fuck knows why Melisandre had to put a leech on Gendry's dick, that's messed up, dude. The ending, while pretty disconnected from the rest of the episode, is still well built and pretty fucking hype. For taking away my wedding stool, Second Sons will be fucking its own bride with a wooden cock.
Number 21. Lord Snow.
You know, for just the third episode of the show, Lord Snow has so much shit going on. With Ned in King's Landing, we get through a bunch of introductions. Cat's Dagger investigation is a great avenue for learning about Peter and Varys, and sure, we can learn about Renly and Barristan later on. We meet Syrio too, he's pretty cool. And at the Wall we meet, well, everyone, but most importantly, Aemon, Jayor, Alliser, and Yoren. Fuck, I love Yoren. Dany's power balance with Viserys begins to shift. We see the world from the top of the Walrus a few times, which is cool. Robert gets to be a champ, Jorah exists, and Tyrion takes a very tall piss. I don't really have much more to say about this one other than it's just super solid. I make the rules here, not every episode needs the same treatment. For living in the eye of a blue-eyed giant named Macumba, Lord Snow gets to braid my hair and talk about girl stuff. At Jahaka.
Ath Jahaka.
At Jahaka!
Number 20. The Mountain and the Viper.
I was thoroughly perplexed when nobody I asked told me that this was their favorite episode, but I guess the Mountain and the Viper's hype doesn't pull it all the way up to the top. Some components just seem a little out of place. I'm not going to go too harsh on Ygritte sparing Gilly during the Molestown attack because I guess she has sympathy for the baby. She knows Gilly is a named character maybe. In total, the attack provides a decent prelude to watchers. Meereen is weird, Moat Cailin is good, and at the Eyrie I love that Sansa holds power over Peter momentarily. Seeing her genuinely outplay the Lord's Declarant is great. Barristan receives Tywin's forged pardon of Jorah from some random kid and everyone just goes along with it. He tells Jorah before he tells Dany, but then when Jorah gets to Dany, she already knows? Yeah, Meereen is weird. Luce Roose legitimizes Ramsay, which is cute, and then he also lies about how big the North is. Arya and Sandor for some reason turn around when they learn that Lysa is dead, as though Sweet Robin wouldn't be just as accepting of her. Okay, I'm starting to see why the one scene doesn't carry this episode. And I don't need to tell you about Gregor versus Oberyn, you already know how sick it is. But I do need to tell you about the cringy scene before it where the showrunners used Tyrion and Jaime as mouthpieces to diss Orson Scott Card as petty revenge for his criticism of the show. Yes, that's why they invented Orson Lannister, and that's why he's slow, as they put it.
Smurf the Beatles! Smurf them! Go!
It's kinda disgusting. For raping my sister, murdering her, and killing her children, The Mountain and the Viper could have been fucking excellent, but I'm gonna have to flay it.
Number 19. Winter is Coming.
Hard to think that it's been 10 years. What a way to start a series. You know exactly what you're in for from just the first scene. Fantasy that fucks from the very first moment. This thing takes itself seriously, is willing to be patient to make the most of its plot, and dude, the main character's first real action is beheading a sympathetic boy in front of his prepubescent son. Winter is Coming understands exactly what it needs to do, and it does it extremely well. I just love how the episode introduces all the relevant characters and plots and facets of the world in tandem with one another. For example, Ned's reluctant execution of Will shows us the kind of guy Ned is, the place he holds in the world, and the overarching plot of the whole series. Well, all but 3 episodes. And the next scene characterizes 4 more important characters while introducing us to sigils and house relations and symbolizing the other overarching plot of the whole series, the struggle for the throne. And both of these plots are further elaborated upon as the episode goes on before it ends with a thrilling shock, introducing the show's love of dramatic endings. God damn, everyone's introduced so effectively. As far as missteps go, I can only really think of the early spoil that Jaime and Cersei had nothing to do with Jon Arryn's death, and maybe the nature of Daenerys' wedding night. For cutting Jon Snow's hair, Winter is Coming is banned from climbing.
No climbing.
Number 18. Valar Dohaeris.
A delicious cold open. Sam is a total screw-up, Mormont foretells the apocalypse, credits roll, fuck yes. Valar Dohaeris knows how to kickstart a season. Jon mistakes Tormund for Mance, they're both excellent, and Jon's supposed motivation for joining the Free Folk is great. Cersei and Bronn are in the same shot for I think the only time ever, wow. Davos finds rescue, Salador chastises him, and later on he tries to kill Mel for pushing the dead sun button. You'd think maybe he'd continue to hold a grudge against the guy who actually organized his death, but whatever, time heals all murdered children, I guess.
Sounds like a charmer.
Robb takes Harrenhal, imprisons his mother, all good, and we meet Qyburn. Wow. Tyrion demands Casterly Rock from Tywin, which is kind of weird, as is Tywin's respect for his father. The resulting beatdown is great though. Marjorie's orphanage shenanigans are also a little odd, but whatever. Dany arrives in Astapor, Krasnitz is great, and Barristan motherfucking Selmy is back to save Kelly from the Manticore. And though the Warlocks are never mentioned again, I love Ian McKellany, and it's a great reintroduction to the character. For killing my son, Valar Dohaeris isn't all that bad.
Number 17. The Ghost of Harrenhal.
Usually, a moment as striking as Renly's death is what ends an episode, so I commend whoever decided to use this moment to begin the Ghost of Harrenhal rather than end Garden of Bones. This decision allowed the entire episode to follow on directly from Renly's death, chasing the repercussions around the realm. Loras' grieving is great, and I really wish they'd stuck with his love for Renly rather than throwing him in bed with Olyvar in just one season's time. Tyrion and Cersei, I don't want to say celebrate, but they discuss the ramifications in one of these end-to-end brilliant King's Landing scenes, wherein they also talk about how to defend the city. Lancel the beaten dog tells Tyrion of the wildfire Cersei's making, which sends the imp to Helene for just such a fun scene. King's Landing is so goddamn fun. Stannis struggles with his kinslaying, Theon meets Dagmar, and they sneakily come up with the plan to steal Winterfell as they leave Pike. Tywin's counsel is great, I love the tension at the end with Arya, and then Jaqen tells her the deal with the names. Gendry is hot, and then the tickler goes for a tumble. Jon really wants to go with Corran, and Jayor submits. Drogon is adorable, and the Dothraki debate on how to steal the Golden Peacock is some hilarious levity. Quaithe is weird and pointless, and Karth is kinda just slow and strange. Brienne's vow to Cat and the surrounding scene is awesome. For listening to a twisted demon monkey, the Ghost of Harrenhal, yep, it's pretty good.
Number 16. The King's Road.
If a first episode has the unenviable task of gaining the viewer's attention, the second episode then has the even harder job of maintaining it. After getting its one pretty uneventful scene out of the way, The King's Road fills its runtime with emotion, backstory, action, and fallout. I've always adored the entire Micah incident for being a microscopic prelude of how the entire Stark-Lannister conflict is going to play out over season 1. Cersei will lie, cheat, and manipulate to protect her family, Ned will struggle with sacrificing his honor for his family, Arya will keep strong, Sansa will be pacified, and innocent people will die. Other standouts are Dany's little self-contained story of finding agency by pleasing Drogo. Little fucked, but I guess that's par for the course. Cat goes through a lot too, bonding with Cersei, getting sliced up, and leaving for King's Landing. Jon and Arya are adorable, but things go south for both of them quickly. Tyrion is reinforced as being just a whole lot of fun in this episode, and for burying its face in my tits, the King's Road gets slapped in the face 3 times.
Mother, oh God.
Number 15. The Pointy End.
Ooh, this one's Germs. Right into the action, the pointy end kicks off with a fucking massacre and follows both Stark daughters through the aftermath of Ned's failed coup. Bye Mordain, bye Syrio, Arya makes it out, securing her first kill, and Sansa doesn't, and so Cersei's extremely complicated relationship with her takes form. Robb goes to war, his meat is bloody tough as is Hodor's cock. Cat is fucking livid but gets to see her son again, I guess. Tyrion shares his goat and makes promises he can't possibly keep. Tywin thinks it's funny. Kevin's here. At Castle Black, there's the whole thing with the Whites after Jon has a go at killing Thorny. Dany meets Miri, Drogo's a fucking badass, and so for dismissing me from its Kingsguard, I'm going to cut through the pointy end like carving a cake. What an episode.
Number 14. The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
Ooh, this one's Germs. This episode is so heavily focused on love and sex. The Bear and the Maiden Fair explores the love triangle of Jon, Ygritte, and Orell, Rob's growing love for his now pregnant wife, all the things Margaery learned from her mother, Sansa and Tyrion's inability to love one another, Tyrion's increasingly difficult relationship with Shae, Theon's lust is tortured out of him both metaphorically and literally, Jaime and Brienne's relationship sees a huge turning point, he didn't have to save her, even Osha's little backstory focuses entirely on her feelings for Bruni. It's fucking incredible how tightly knit this episode is around romance. It's almost as fixated on one idea as the episodes that take place at a single location. But it's not all birds and bees. Joffrey gets huffy at Tywin, which has nothing to do with love, but it's still great.
We could arrange to have you carried. You are being counseled at this very moment.
Dany meets with Razdal and takes all his shit lmao. Arya's sulking about Gendry almost falls into the episode's theme, but not quite, and then she's captured by the Hound just to keep us on our toes. The thrilling conclusion with Brienne and the titular bear, while still great, is a little off thematically, which makes sense seeing as it was originally intended for a different episode and wasn't written by Gurm. For selling my only friend into slavery, the Bear and the Maiden Fair gets Qyburn.
Number 13. What is dead may never die.
Forget about the rest of it. The sheer cleverness of Tyrion figuring out who Cersei's mole is more than enough to earn this episode its spot. What is dead may never die is awesome. The only scene I'm not fully on board with is Shae's anger with Tyrion. Mormont's dire speech to Jon and reveal that he already knows about Craster's practices really puts into place how dark this story will get. We meet Brienne and Margaery as Cat comes upon Renly's camp to begin the fruitful military alliance between him and Robb. Just kidding. Just have sex with your wife, dude. Come on, it's easy. There's some Greyjoy family drama as Theon is super pissed at Yara and Balon has no respect for Theon. King's Landing is a lot of fun as there's an awkward family dinner and Tyrion finds Shae a safe place as Sansa's handmaiden before this gush-worthy scene. Oh, it's so great. I love how annoyed Peter gets at Tyrion, yet he still works with him to get what he wants. The conclusion of Tyrion's plan, Pycelle's capture, is awesome.
Cut off his manhood and feed it to the goats.
No. There are no goats, half man.
We'll make do.
Season 2 is just full of levity and wit. Yoren is a badass who provides the genesis for Arya's list and he goes down like a rock star, that is if rock stars went down with swords in their throats. In the chaos Amory's men cause, Arya frees Jaqen and such, and we end on Polliver gouging whatever the fuck a Lomi is. Oh, also Luwin is cool. For just being so cool, What is Dead May Never Die can replace Victarion.
Number 12. Walk of Punishment.
Ramsay kills his own men just to convince Theon that he's really on his side. What a fucking mad lad. Walk of Punishment is such a fun episode. Just a happy, jaunty romp where a few people get murdered, some slaves get tortured, Edmure gets a mill, and Jaime loses his sword hand and therefore his entire identity, and it's all capped off with an appropriately cheery rendition of The Bear and the Maiden Fair. A lot of people were not fans of this credits tune, but I think it plays a big part in creating one of the show's best endings. The last scene is so horrific with what's about to happen to Brienne being interrupted for Jaime's surprise mutilation, it could shock you frozen. And then this tune just starts slapping along and completely breaks the tension. I think it's the best way to get audiences asking, whoa, what the fuck just happened? As opposed to the more straightforward approach of cinematic orchestral instrumentation. The rest of the episode is also crazy good. I'm not the biggest fan of gruff, uncaring Blackfish and the way he and Robb treat Edmure, but it's not like it doesn't make sense for them. The small council scrambles for chairs in the Tower of the Hand and Tyrion is named Master of Coin. I love his witty dueling with Peter, and of course the Rod God finally becomes star of the show. Dean Charles Chapman is yet to take form as Tommen, so for now he plays fact or crap about Robb with Talisa, which is weird, but I guess it serves to give the Lannister boys some character before they're murdered. For blowing my ears off, Walk of Punishment gets something that'll help it remember.
Number 11. Valar Morghulis.
Opening with Tyrion's recovery from the Blackwater, Value Morghulis is a keen demonstration of this show's ability to handle aftermath and consequences, a skill whose degradation was a key factor in the program's decline. Tywin accepts the handship, Peter is granted Harrenhal, Joffrey sets Sansa aside, instead securing the Tyrell alliance with Margaery. Even just the first scene is completely packed with big changes to the status quo. Similarly, Varys sets up Ros as a double agent, Stannis isn't giving up, Theon gets completely reamed after a captivating monologue and a very pog speech. I love Lewin's plan for Theon to take the black. That's his answer for everything. Won't get you out of this one, old man. Tyrion's lost all his power in spite of his accomplishments, but he hasn't lost his unlikely gang of friends. Aw. Brienne cuts down some hanged men and absolutely demolishes some Stark soldiers, proving to us that A, she's a girl boss, and 2, her loyalty truly is solely to Cat. Speaking of, Cat's trying to convince Robb to not be a gigantic moron. It's not necessarily an error, but Robb making one of the biggest boneheaded decisions to marry Talisa, even with his mother's counsel, is rather questionable. It does make for a notable shift in circumstances, though. The payoff for Daenerys' snail-paced plot in Season 2 is a very busy finale, with the confrontation and visions at the House of the Undying and the fate of Xaro. Jon's plot also reaches a perfectly timed conclusion with the epic Corran duel and arrival at Mance's camp. Jaqen encourages Arya to go to a terrible plot in Braavos, but she needs to mill around for about 2 more seasons first, so he does the face thing and fucks off. Lewin's death always gets me more than I think it will. It's so damn tragic. And then, as though it couldn't get any more exciting, the others march on the fist. Value Magoolis is a fucking packed finale that only misses out on the top 10 simply because there aren't enough numbers below 11. For breaking its betrothal to my daughter, I'm gonna massacre Value Magoolis in about a year's time.
Number 10. You win or you die.
While I would love to describe to you myself why You Win or You Die is such a brilliant episode, I much prefer the way Carmine from RedTeamReview put it when I asked him about his favourite episode.
My choice is also Season 1, Episode 7, You Win or You Die. It's the episode where it ends off with Littlefinger going,
I did warn you not to trust me.
Ooh, I love that fucking actor so much. Oh, God, I love... that one throne scene, it has everything you'd ever want in, like, Game of Thrones. Betrayal, blood, lies, deceit. Like, it has the whole royal backstab, a Game of Thrones, like, it has everything you could possibly want. Also in the same episode, the brilliant introduction of Charles Dance as Tywin Lannister, where Jaime comes in, is trying to talk to him, and he's just cutting the stag up, and it's just, such a great goddamn, like, so good. So good. I believe that's also the same episode where Jon Snow and Samwell Tarly swear their oaths, which also a great scene as well. Also the episode where Drogo commits to invading Westeros, and it's also the same episode where, Cersei's like,
when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
And it's just, it's such a good, episode in general. And especially that last one, that's how you end a fucking episode. Yeah, I did warn you not to, that's how you end it. Oof. Greatest episode.
Dude fucking loves his Littlefinger, hey. I don't have too much else to say, he's completely right. You Win or You Die is framed around the fallout from Robert's death, and it's fucking brilliant end to end, as are all episodes in this top 10. The final 10 minutes of this one are just so much fun to watch between Drogo's speech and Ned's coup. What a cliffhanger, what an ending. For reducing conflicts into 2 outcomes, I'm gonna tear up You Win or You Die's favorite piece of paper.
Number 9. A Golden Crown.
Is it just because I love Harry Lloyd? Is that the only reason this episode made it so high? Well, yes, but actually no. A Golden Crown has so much more going on, and you know how much I love titles with multiple applications. King's Landing, the Eyrie and Vaes Dothraki, brilliant bubblings of the slow-boiling plots the previous 5 episodes had been cooking. Ned finally puts 2 and 2 together, Viserys earns his crown, and Bronn's cool too, I guess. Even scenes that seem tiny in scope compared to Ned declaring war in the Riverlands or Tyrion's trial are consistently crafted, like Roz's departure from Winterfell, Osha's introduction, Joffrey's gift, and of course my favourite show-only scene across 73 episodes, Here I Stand. Viserys got review hype. The only faltering I can smell in this episode is Robert's hunt, which George himself isn't too happy with either. It's not terrible narratively, it just sticks out rather sorely in terms of world building. For not fighting with honour, a Golden Crown gets this pretty necklace because I love it so much, aww.
Number 8. Kissed by Fire.
The 5th episode of Season 3, Kissed by Fire, definitely didn't need to go so hard. Like, everyone would have understood if it was just another episode, you know? Nobody would have had anything against it. But fuck that, Kissed by Fire says. I'm gonna go all out, and so it did. Opening with the Hound's drive-by wombat, we're set up for success from the get-go. Beric's revival is fucking awesome, and the Hound's victory is just one more little way the show gets to gut-punch its protagonists. Arya is suitably upset, and even more so when Gendry intends on staying with Beric, and finally voices what Gendry means to her.
I can be your family.
Which is really touching. Jon and Ygritte's relationship escalates big time, and it's all very cute and actually shot in the same cave as the Brotherhood, which I thought was funny at least. In King's Landing, everything's just like good. It all just works. This scene between Tyrion and Olenna didn't have to be so well written, but it is. It feels like every scene in this episode is inspired by one particular scene, and you know what I'm talking about. Perhaps the best written, best shot, best acted scene in the entirety of Game of Thrones, Jaime has a bath. I can, and someday will, gush about this scene at length, but come on, just look at the time code of this video. Just...
The Kingslayer!
Jaime. My name's Jaime.
It's so thoroughly excellent. Anyway, Karstark kills the boys and Robb beheads him. Another great beat. We meet Selyse, who is fucking nuts. We meet Shireen, who is adorable. And we meet Grey Worm, who is kinda intimidating. Barry and Jorah catch up. Loras meets Oliver, and my only gripe with this episode is that he's completely over Renly and hops straight into bed with Oliver, who I think I've expressed I do not like. To finish it off, Tywin announces 2 marriages of his children. Tyrion is to marry Sansa, and Cersei Loras. But wait, I don't want to-
You're my daughter!
Oh, fuck that's strong. So for keeping all my sons in jars like a fucking weirdo, Kissed by Fire gets revived at least 3 more times.
Number 7. The Lion and the Rose.
Ooh, this one's Germs. Demonstrating Theon's fucked up servitude to Ramsay and the daring beard on the handsome shark himself, The Lion and the Rose is, okay, who are we kidding? This episode is only here for its final scene. But man, do I love this scene, and this scene. Widow's Wail is such a terrible name for a sword, of course Joffrey would go for it. Tyrion dumps Shay, that's pretty heavy. Stannis is Pog, Bran sees some shit to build some hype. Jack Gleeson knows that this is his episode, and he fucking kills it. What a performance. There are so many interesting little interactions at the wedding.
Not now, Mace. Lord Tywin and I are speaking.
I love how you can see Olenna commit the crime. That's a great little detail. Loras flirting with Oberyn is strange, but Jaime's conversation with him is good shit too. Imagine having the balls to talk back to Jaime Lannister like that.
And neither will you.
Brienne doesn't even talk to Sansa, even though she's right fucking there, so that's... I don't like that. Maybe that's why we're talking about this otherwise marvelous episode at 7th place and not 3rd. For turning the joy to ashes in my mouth, the Lion and the Rose dies in its mother's arms. Fuck, what an ending. What an episode.
Number 6. The Wolf and the Lion.
When the most celebrated Game of Thrones communicator on the platform asks if he can talk about the wolf and the lion in your video, you dare not refuse. So without any further preambling, here's Alt Schwift X. Ah, fuck, I read the memo wrong. Anyway, here's Alt Schwift X. Again.
My name is Alt Schwift X, and Season 1, Episode 5, The Wolf and the Lion, is a banger. You've got the Ned and Big Bazza the Bold being bros. You've got Bobby Baratheon at both his most bombastic and heartfelt. Arya chases cats and overhears conspiracies. Catelyn takes Tyrion to the Eyrie. Loopy Lysa chucks him in a sky cell, so Jaime sticks Ned's leg with the pointy end. So many iconic moments, and some of the best bits aren't even in the books. Like this scene with Theon and Ros that explores Theon's insecurities and kicks off Ros's seasons-long arc. And this scene where Varys and Littlefinger circle each other, trading barbs, dripping with intrigue and mystery. It highlights their rivalry as grand puppet masters playing strategic schemes high above the rest of the Game of Thrones, in a way that's only alluded to in the books. These are all great additions to the story, bringing depth to the characters and clarity to the plot. The big problem with the later seasons of the show is clearly that they ran out of books to adapt and didn't know how to end the story properly. But in the early seasons, they were really good at adding scenes to the existing story. And one of the greatest show-only scenes is this one between Cersei and Robert. For a moment, the king and queen put aside their years of mutual hatred and share in their feelings of exhaustion and sadness and longing for what could have been. It's a profoundly humanizing scene for 2 characters who were otherwise pretty horrible. So many stories divide the world into good guys and bad guys, but at its best, Game of Thrones shows love and pain and hope on both sides of every conflict, and invites us to see the world more complexly and with more compassion. This episode's also got the bit with the breastplate stretcher.
Bow before your king! Bow, you shits!
I can't help but think that Alt Schwift X would have done it better, but thanks anyway. For showing us the only Clegane bowl we actually needed, I'm going to shave the wolf and the lion's armpits.
Number 5. Baelor.
It still makes me sad. What a brilliant tragedy. So much of Baelor is spent building up to just one event, even most of the things that aren't kind of are, like Rob's speech after Jaime's capture, or Jon's conversation about duty with Aemon, which, as I've voiced before, is possibly the best scene in Season 1, and it's got some strong-ass competition. Jon gets Longclaw too, which gives a beautiful moment of boyish innocence and victory before all hell starts to break loose. Same goes for Rob's smashing victories, and hell, the glimpse of hope Sansa has when it almost looks like Joffrey is going to give Ned mercy. We meet Walder Frey this episode too, because apparently there wasn't enough awesome shit happening yet. Miri does all her magic-y stuff, Jorah pogs up for Dany, and I've always loved Yoren popping back up to save Arya. And by the 7, what a way to send off your main character. What a message to send to your audience. For letting us think that there was still any room for hope, Baelor will be remembered as one of the greatest shocks in TV history for decades to come. Ned's death may just be the defining moment of Game of Thrones. Well, it's either that or...
Number 4. The Reigns of Castamere.
Yep, that's right, 4th. And honestly, the Reigns of Castamere is, moment to moment, not as good as Baelor, but who cares about judging all the moments when you've got the one moment to dethrone them all? Legend has it that Benioff and Weiss were mainly only interested in adapting Game of Thrones for this one scene, and judging by the show's wavering quality basically straight after it happens, it kinda makes sense. But my god if it isn't worth it. Yeah, I know they ruined the show, I know it as well as any of you. I don't care. It was worth it. All the bad pussy and fingers in the bum and McQueens in the world, it was all worth it for the Red Wedding. So much of this episode and season and show is constructed around making the most of this one moment. The show went on for 5 more seasons, but man, this is the real climax. Elsewhere, Jon is forced to out himself as a crow in this big confrontation that Bran happens to be present for. That's kinda cool. Arya attends the wedding, but not like that, and Dany sacks Yunkai. The Jon shit is good, and I like Arya's coldness towards Sandor, but it all pales in comparison to how the episode ends, as does everything else. So though the rest of Baelor is generally better than the rest of the Reigns of Castamere, for uniting us all in grieving for fictional royalty, it will be remembered as one of the biggest cultural moments of the 2010s. Oh, also, I love how the credits are silent. That's a big brain move right there.
Number 3. Blackwater.
Ooh, this one's Germs. Yeah, I was surprised too. I really expected it to be number 1, but here we are. Blackwater is incredible. The first episode spent entirely in one location. It really demonstrates the show's ability to maintain your attention for a whole 50 minutes. Of course, the whole fucking episode is gripping and excellent, so I'm just gonna have to point out my favorite bits. Of course, the wildfire explosion is brilliantly built to across the entire season and is every bit as thrilling and horrific as it should be. The terror and desperation in Davos' voice the moment he watches his son die, get down! Followed by the most visually spectacular moment of the series yet, would make it unforgettable on its own. But then it's followed by Stannis' resolve to push on.
Hundreds will die. Thousands.
I know that calling it epic isn't much of an argument when others could easily say the same thing about episodes I rated very poorly, but the difference is how solid the story's foundation is and how true the characters are to themselves. Tyrion's speech as he rallies Joffrey's men is absolutely pog.
We've got brave men knocking at our door. Let's go kill them!
Sandor stopping by to save Sansa on his way out is a super interesting moment, and the cliff gets temporarily hanged regarding whether she went with him or not, so that's interesting. And of course, Mandan's attack on Tyrion and Podrick's sudden saving of him happens so quickly, and it's like, whoa, that just happened! And like, dude, Cersei's about to fucking kill Tommen when Tywin arrives. That's heavy shit, dude. The last 3 minutes of Blackwater are so loaded and frantically paced that it just grabs your ass and pushes it to the edge of your seat. For providing me with spectacle so incredibly built up to, Blackwater, yeah, it's alright, I guess.
Number 2. Fire and Blood.
I love this episode. Hook this episode to my veins, please. I would love to explain at length why Fire and Blood is one of the finest episodes of any TV show I've seen, but I would much rather let a seasoned veteran have at it. So, take it away, Preston.
I thought about it a bit, and I think my favorite is probably Fire and Blood, which is episode 10 of season 1. They did a good job in recognizing some of the high points of, the novel Game of Thrones and then put them all in the same episode to create a pretty good ending. Like some are built in, like obviously like Daenerys's story ends a Game of Thrones, and that's an incredible scene. Probably one of the best chapters George R.R. Martin has ever written is Daenerys 10, a Game of Thrones. And so, putting that to screen at the end of the season is incredible. But they also take some things that wouldn't necessarily be the final scene of some characters and make it the end. Robb being King of the North happens a little bit earlier than the end of a Game of Thrones happens, but they kind of make that the ending. And so I just thought, I thought they did a pretty good job in like just having all of those beats happen at the same time to end on a big, good, positive note. They did a good job in shifting Jon's story to being him leaving the wall, it being a moment of change. That doesn't happen in the books. Like they don't leave until a chapter into A Clash of Kings. So they announce that they're going to leave, but the Night's Watch going through that gate and having the voiceover of saying we're going to find Benjen Stark, da 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 da. I thought that was really well done. So they hit a lot of good notes. They knew how to end the season, and I thought, I'm trying to think of an episode that was done as well, and I can't really think of one where the whole episode is just done kind of just perfectly like that.
Thanks, man. Love your work. #Comet is a Vulcan. Usually he's probably wrong about half of it, but here he's right about all of it. From its opening dealing with Baelor's fallout to its epic conclusions of Robb, Jon, and Dany's stories, Fire and Blood is, for lack of a more dramatic term, the perfect conclusion to Game of Thrones' first season. Sandor saves Sansa's life, Peter and Varys get a delicious duel in the throne room, Tyrion and Arya are flung into wild new circumstances. Even the scene where Pycelle is rambling to Ros is really fucking good. It didn't need to be, but it is, because Fire and Blood is perfect. There are no episodes like this one. For solidifying season 1 as a thorough masterpiece of television, Fire and Blood should honestly be the top entrant on this list, but it isn't, because sometimes perfection isn't what you want. Sometimes you want hype. I agonized over this for weeks. All I could think about was what episode I would call the best. The bottom 10 was obvious. The rest of the top 10, pretty easy. But ordering these last 3 episodes was torturous. In the end, though, all of them are masterpieces, and putting them in any order is arbitrary. So I guess the agony was for nothing, because it's all the same, whether I end with Blackwater, Fire and Blood, or...
Number 1. The Watchers on the Wall.
This might be the most controversial placing on the list, and if you'll recall, I put Hardhome in the high 30s. But yeah, Watchers on the Wall is... I guess it's my favorite. It's basically got everything Blackwater has, save for the big explosion, and it has what I consider to be more compelling emotional through lines. The Long Night can fuck right off. This is the Helm's Deep of Game of Thrones. The action in the siege is so dynamic. There's so many established angles that we get to view the conflict from. Fuck me, it's just brilliant. Of course, before we get into all the gloom and doom, there's so much fun to be had in this episode.
Is it so difficult to imagine that an old person was once, more or less, like you?
I absolutely adore this scene between Aemon and Sam where they talk about love. Peter Vaughan is a total scene stealer, and then it's immediately followed by...
Oh, Pip! Open the fucking gate!
And it's just so cool to see Sam so emotive for once.
Yes, well, let's get used to it.
Then the horn sounds, and holy shit, just look at that fire. Okay, we're gonna run into issues if I list every scene I love, because it's all of them. But man, it's so cool to see Alistair confiding in / counseling Jon about what it's like to lead, and conceding that Jon was right about the tunnel. This is a rivalry that had been brewing for 4 years, but they're working together just this once because they know that if they don't, they're fucked. Sam is waking the fuck up in this episode. Holy.
Promise me you won't die.
I promise. I will never die.
The only issue that comes to mind is how underdeveloped Stir is. Like, he gets more screen time devoted to him than Small John Umber or Mandon Moore, but not as much as, say... I guess he's pretty well established as far as Game of Thrones mini-bosses go. Weird. And if stir doesn't do it for you, then surely the kick-ass Torm and Alistair fight does. To do this episode justice, I'd have to do a far more detailed exploration of why it's so fucking brilliant, but for now, it just totally perplexes me how this one has gone by the wayside in so many lists I've seen. If your hairs don't stand to attention when Mag charges at Gren, I think we're just working on completely different wavelengths. If you didn't make the pog face when you first saw the scythe come down from the wall, what the fuck? If you didn't die inside when Jon held his dying love in his arms, fair enough, it's a bit much and I know not everyone likes Ygritte, but I personally love it to pieces. This episode is on par with the best of the best and strikes me as one of the best battles ever put to screen. As a total experience just unto itself, The Watchers on the Wall is a complete delight from end to end. I'm sure from a lot of angles it isn't the best. I'm sure it has a lot of flaws I'm too blinded by excitement to see. That's valid, but just for this moment, I don't care. For a self-contained episode, it tells its story so fucking tightly, and it's so goddamn fun to watch. I love The Watchers on the Wall, and I always will. And it's my favorite episode of my favorite show, so there you go. And now, my watch is ended.
There! Over and done with.
A big thank you to Ben Crompton, Kerry Ingram, RedTeamReview, and Preston Jacobs for their segments, and thank you for watching the biggest video I hope I ever make. And a big fuck you to Alt Schwift X for interrupting me like that. I want to point out that this is entirely my list. I asked these folks to talk about episodes of their own choosing, and they had no say on the actual order of the list. It's all my fault. So much of this show is so great in so many different ways that the top of this list is very tight. For analogous reasons, the bottom of the list is also packed. The top 5 and bottom 5 were very clear to me, and the rest took a bit of thinkering. But hey, if you have a different top 5 or bottom 5 or 10 or 37, or like you think that numbers 43 and 44 should have been swapped, or something weirdly specific like that, then go ahead and say so. If you'd like to see me elaborate on season 7 or 8, I have videos addressing each of their episodes individually, and my never-ending GOT review series is tackling season 1 in more detail than anybody ever asked for. I think I will have to do more detailed breakdowns of those top 5 to really show why they deserve those places. Thanks also to my highest tier patrons, Aglahir, Org, Blue Mustard, Glanus, Ingvald, Hoverarm, Moremoths, Samsoom, Simcoe, Stay78, Waffl, Wisdom Manari, and Ondy. You are all my little pog champs. Feel free to subscribe, join my Discord server, or follow me on Twitter because those things are free, but don't feel free to pledge on Patreon because that isn't free. Do consider it though. For actually getting a video done on time for once, Glidus gets to go lie down for a bit now. Thanks so much for watching and supporting. Season 6 videos next. Next time I have an idea like this, punch me in the face.
Subscribe, don't subscribe, don't matter, does it? We're all gonna die in the end. And that's nothing to look forward to either, is it? Because let's be honest, the dead are likely dull fellows, full of tedious complaints.